gentlemen, welcome to the regular council meeting for Monday, March the 2nd. Mr. Jackson, do we have any late items?
Number of late items here, Your Worship. First one is a delegation from Mr. Robert Fuller for the Core Services Review Steering Committee, and that's 7A. Next one, there are two items here, 8K. The one in the addendum states a removal of 485 Pine Street. There's also another one, a removal of 812 Short Ave. Under 9B, Property Maintenance Bylaw, we have another removal of 2404 York Crescent. And the final item I have is adding a delegation from Mr. Jeff Solomon regarding correspondence for the Middle Chase River Dam and Lower Chase River Dam potential safety hazards.
Thank you very much. Do we have a motion for the adoption of the agenda?
I so moved.
And seconded. Any discussion? All those in, Councillor.
Yeah, I'd like to know
Councillor
if we could possibly move the Colliery Dam presentation up prior to the waiting for the end of the meeting delegation as correspondence. I'd like to move them up. I believe they would go into presentation staff. Is that where they would?
Certainly, it's Council's pleasure.
Thank you. Second. So the motion has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? No discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Opposed, Councillor Brennan. Okay. Thorpe and Pratt. Motion is defeated. Next item.
Oh no, so we move the agenda as amended.
Yes, move the agenda. It's the adoption.
The adoption.
Right. Adoption of agenda. Mover. Seconder?
I thought we did that already.
Did already? Okay, pardon me. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, motion for adoption of minutes. First one, minutes of the special meeting of the council of February the 5th. We have a motion for adoption. Moved? Seconded? Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Minutes of the regular meeting for February 16th. No mover. Moved? Seconded? Discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Presentations? None? Okay. Next item, Mayor's report. Council advisory.
Your Worship, I understand that the Colliery Dam's correspondence was under this section.
I'm sorry?
Is that correct? No? I'm sorry.
Failed. Council advisory committees and commissions to provide options regarding council advisory committees and commissions. The motion is on page 32, and it's very long listed. Do we want to go through each one? Do we want to do them with seriatim, or do we want to take them as a block? Do we have any consideration for that?
I would move items 1 to 4, and then I suspect that we'll have to do 5, A, B, and C, seriatim, and then we can move on to 6, 7, and 8.
Motion to move 1 to 4 as a block. Okay. Seconded. Discussion. No, I don't see it coming on. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, the number 1, I have no problem. 2, 3, and number 4. One of my only concerns is that SAFER, the advisory committee, came out of social planning quite a few years back now, and it was originally because I believe of all the chaos in the downtown core. I'm just wondering is with the mandate of the social planning advisory committee and the SAFER mandate. I've always said it would be nice to have a SAFER, which we are expanding SAFER throughout the whole community. But I wonder if that wouldn't be a one committee instead of a double. Did we consider that at all? I know we're always talking about reducing some of the committee work, but from my view, I believe it did come out of SAFER, and maybe I can ask staff if they have any background. And was there any comprehension of putting them together in one committee?
Your Worship, this is Council's discussion, and you had a session on developing the committees that I would leave it up to Council to decide whether you would like it to remain separate or be merged together. But I think you're right, it did come out of social planning in the beginning.
Thank you. That's my only.
Is there any consideration for a motion to that effect?
Not now. I'm not going to drop on the table now.
Any further discussion? Seeing none? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The next one was item number 5 by itself. Councillor Beswick?
I'd be seeking staff's direction, but I'm assuming that we have to do these readings, A, B, and C, independent of one, sorry, Adam?
That's correct. So you'd have to do first as a separate motion to second reading and to third for each bylaw.
I move 5A.
Second.
Any discussion? Yes. Okay, hang on a second here. I'm sorry. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No, it should now. Go ahead.
Just in this subject area regarding the wording in 5B and C, we refer to the Culture and Heritage Commission, and we refer to the Parks and Recreation Committee. And I would think those should be consistent as we move forward. I would prefer to see Parks and Recreation, for now at least, retain its designation as commission, at least until after our review situation. So we have Culture and Heritage Commission. I would request that, and I don't know if a motion is called for, that Parks and Recreation also be titled as commission.
No. As it stands right now, we're showing the Nanaimo Community Heritage Commission and the...
That's all wrong right now, aren't we?
So, Your Worship, I think what Councillor Thorpe's referring to is actually in 5C.
Yes.
Where there's direction looking at creating a mandate and objectives, and there are two there. One is for the Nanaimo Culture and Heritage, which states commission. The second one is the Parks and Rec Committee. And I believe what Councillor Thorpe's referring to is Parks and Recreation shouldn't be committee, it should be commission as well.
Yeah.
That's council's pleasure as well. So that would just be for C. When you look at items A and B, they're actually bylaws. And that's the proper reference to the bylaw as a commission, because that's the way the bylaw is written.
And Your Worship, if council desires to name them as commissions but not have the powers of commission, that's also okay. I think Councillor Thorpe was just suggesting that they both be the same, whatever you choose.
That's right. They should be consistent. Does that require a motion?
Would?
Mr. Swaby?
Sorry, when we approach 5C, if council proceeds there, then I think you could change the word committee to commission for
Thank
Parks
you.
and Recreation at that time.
Thank you.
Councillor Kemp.
Did we not adjust this to be Parks, Rec, and Environment and shifted the culture out of that? And has that name change been adapted from our organizational restructuring from almost a year ago?
It's my understanding that the department is referred to as Park, Recreation, and Environment. However, for the committee structure, we have ACES, which is the Advisory Committee on Environmental Sustainability, and that would remain on its own. So then Parks and Recreation would have their own committee separate. So it wouldn't be referred to as an overarching committee.
Thank you for
Any further speakers? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
So, Your Worship, just to clarify, that was first reading for bylaw, the Nanaimo Community Heritage Commission repeal bylaw 2015, number 7208.
Yes?
And so we'll be looking for second reading on that bylaw as well.
Okay.
Mover, same mover.
Same mover? Seconder. Seconder. Okay, see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second reading?
Third reading, so
We're
moved.
going to third.
Second.
First and second, okay. No further, no speakers. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Move 5B,
5B.
give first reading to the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Commission repeal bylaw 2015, number 7209, which will repeal Parks, Recreation, and Culture Commission bylaw number 2006, number 7020. Give first reading.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Move second reading of the same.
Second. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Move third reading.
Second. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Somebody want to move C?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move 5C with the amended wording change to Parks and Recreation Commission.
So on third line, it would go to Recreation Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bestwick.
If that could just provide an explanation on this motion for me, please. So we're deferring further consideration of both Nanaimo Culture and Heritage and Parks and Rec Commission until the mandate and objectives, until the repealing bylaws are fully considered. When will the repealing bylaws be fully considered?
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Bestwick. So for this one, because a bylaw like this cannot be considered in the same meeting for adoption,
Thank you.
the reason why is at the next meeting, council, we'd be bringing it back, and I'm recommending you defer, so you're not fettering discretion. Okay.
So, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Number 6, to combine Advisory Planning Committee and Transportation Advisory Committee into the Planning and Transportation Advisory Committee and adopt the associated mandate and objectives as attached to this report. Do we have a mover? So mover? Seconder? Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And number 7, direct staff to prepare a mandate and objectives for an intergovernmental committee. Do we have a mover? And seconded by Councillor Kitt. Any discussion? Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Just seeking a time frame for this to return back to council.
Your Worship, I would suggest it would be about a month.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing Councillor Brennan.
I'd be interested in knowing what this means, to be honest, like the intergovernmental committee. Which governments are we talking about? What, how would they mesh together? What would be the purpose of them? Would they have specific tasks, specific issues that they're to discuss? I don't know what that means. Or at least it's not, there's no detail, so I can't imagine what it is.
Mrs. Raby.
Your Worship, that's something that staff will work on in terms of a mandate. We heard during the discussion that there was a desire to have meetings with the school board, with other levels of government, maybe the regional district. So we'll have to think about what the terms of reference look like that would mesh with not conflicting with other committees that you've set up to meet with other bodies that are in the community. So we'll have to think about that and bring back in terms of reference for you to have a look at.
Supplemental?
Yeah, so would you begin by contacting those other governments and ask if they're interested in sitting on this committee, whether they see the value in it or what purpose they would see for it? I know we already meet with the school board. I know we have a committee for the Snuneymuxw First Nations. We have a committee with the Port Authority. None of those interests seem to me to be the same. And I think all of those government bodies would have different interests with different other levels of government.
So, Your Worship, this is, again, something that came from council as a desire to have this type of committee. We'll definitely do some work and look at other jurisdictions, how they handle this type of committee, and we'll come back with some options on how that might be structured. And we definitely would contact other jurisdictions and talk to them about it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Seeing none, I call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And number 8, direct staff to advertise where there are vacancies on committees. So moved. Moved. Seconded. Discussion. Councillor Brennan.
How will you determine what is a vacant position if, it was my understanding that the appointments would expire on April 1st or March 31st? So how do we determine vacant positions, or would that simply be to advertise all positions on the committees? Or is there an expectation that some committee appointments will be extended? I'm not sure what that means.
Your Worship, with this, I think it's the majority of currently sitting members because their terms expire March 31st. So what this is doing is trying to catch all of that. Now, I recognize that there are a couple committees where the terms are overlapping and they do get extended, so rather than make it a really complicated motion, referencing everything, it's just where there's a vacancy, i.e. the majority at the end of this month. We'll be posting that and advertising in the papers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question to staff here on the direction of advertising. It seems like the traditional practice has been via the papers, and I think that's kind of outdated. Do we have a mandate on here what the staff, where they're going to advertise besides the newspapers? Thank you.
Well, right now, you're exactly right, Councillor Hong. So we use the advertising in the local newspapers as normal, but we also have Facebook, we have Twitter. For the Youth Advisory Council, we did a completely different process on that. But right now, there is no direction from council to do anything different. However, the practice at our end would be Facebook, Twitter, as well as the newspapers. But if you want more, absolutely, we'd be so open to any kind of resolution of councils.
Councillor Beswick.
I would suggest that we include those social medias and our own City of Nanaimo website, as well as the traditional forms of advertising. If that's a friendly amendment to the motion.
So, if Your Worship, so I'd read the motion and direct staff to advertise where there are vacancies on committee, including advertising with social media, city's website. Is there anything else specific or a blank check to staff on that one? Beyond that?
Small.
Small check, yeah. Where we find there's innovation and creativity, we'll absolutely go there, yes.
That's fair.
Thank you. So seeing no further speakers, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I've got a note for our technical people. I'm getting tweets from people telling us that they are not hearing us at home. So that would be a note to our Shaw people that they are not hearing us at home. Thank you. Next item.
Get the guy going like this, and that won't help.
Next item, Mr. Jackson, is are the bylaws?
Council's already considered those bylaws. They've given all three readings.
Thank you. Next one, council member, okay, so the next one is mine, which is that council members be appointed to internal and external committees and organizations as outlined in the mayor's report, council appointment. Do we have a mover?
So moved.
So moved. And a seconder, Councillor Hong, okay, very good. Any discussion? Councillor Bestwick.
Similar to my previous question on timeline, is there a timeline for the red-green tape committee?
Let me get you.
Your Worship, there isn't a timeline. We could get it back as soon as we can get to it. I would estimate a month. If it's going to be longer, I'll let council know.
Thank you. I've already got folks that have put their hand up for that committee. Thank you. So, seeing no further speakers, I call the question. Oh, Councillor Brannan.
I'm not sure if this is in order, so tell me if I'm out of order. I just want to comment that there are several instances here where there's been an opportunity, I guess, to look at the diversity on committees, and I think we haven't taken that opportunity. So when we do make our selections after advertising, that we pay close and strict attention to ensuring that there is diversity on those committees.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, Core Services Review Steering Committee. The purpose is to obtain council direction on the establishment of a Core Services Review Steering Committee. We have one delegation, Mr. Robert Fuller. Is Mr. Fuller here? Very good, thank you. Please come down, Mr. Fuller.
Robert Fuller, 3350 Hammond Bay Road. Mayor and Council, to say that I am pleased that our city is entering into the process of a core review, for want of a better term, would be an understatement. Businesses and corporations enter into review processes in one way or another every few years, not only to become more prosperous, but more efficient in the way in which products and services they provide are delivered. While some may view these reviews simply as a cutting and slashing measure, I personally would urge a more common sense approach and to take this time to search for efficiencies within the framework of how we deliver our city services and programs, to determine these efficiencies and to deliver our city services in a more efficient, cost-effective, and timely fashion which would benefit the the citizens of Nanaimo. After all, it is to you to whom it falls to be accountable for the way in which our tax dollars are spent. Look at this review with open minds as a process which enables our city to strive forward, well-equipped into the future. It is my belief that a core review has a great deal of merit for our city and should not be rushed into solely because it was a campaign promise. It requires a great deal of sober thought. This endeavor must be all-encompassing, not only dealing with our services in the way they are delivered, but should also take into account the way monies are funneled into our so-called revitalization projects. That would be our downtown core. The procurement of goods to run our services, the facilities we seem to value, our pools and ice facilities, the VICC and the Port Theatre, the tax dollars being spent to fund NEDC, and the way in which tax exemptions are applied. And yes, even staffing levels must be under the microscope. Are we truly getting the best value for our tax dollars that is possible? Furthermore, this review should be undertaken by an external set of eyes rather than being predicated by internal forces. Yes, we may set the guidelines and parameters, but without impartiality, this review will not live up to be what it can be. After all, you would not want an accountant to audit his own work. No stone should be left unturned, for if this process is not all-encompassing, I believe it will end up being an exercise in futility. Please do not ignore this opportunity and piecemeal it out. You may want to look at how core reviews have been performed in other municipalities, and that is wise. But we can move leaps and bounds above this and create a review process specifically geared towards our city, something to be proud of. You will be approached by various special interest groups who will give you their points of approach to how and what should be included in this process. Much the same as I am sure many of you have your own opinions on this subject. As such, I humbly ask you to weigh this advice and envision what is good for the collective whole of our city rather than the selective few. When seeking out our stakeholders for input into this endeavor, I ask you not to forget our most important, and that is our citizens. I wish you the best in moving ahead with this process and look forward to seeing how this challenge unfolds. If we look forward to this with open minds, eyes, and hearts, this process can only move our city forward to a more promising and prosperous future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fuller. Any questions for the delegation? Seeing none. Move receipt of the delegation. Councillor Brennan? Councillor Pratt? All right then, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We move on to the staff recommendation upon page 44, that council establish a core services review steering committee with the mandate and objectives as set out in Appendix A. Do we have a mover? Councillor Kipp, thank you. And speakers, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. The one page 46, that's Appendix A. That's Appendix A, sorry. That's.
Sorry, yes.
No, yes?
Yes.
Thank you. So should we approve this, Mr. Mayor, then when we are making recommendations to council, the steering committee is all of mayor and council?
Correct.
So just so that when people realize that the committee that's being formed is mayor and council, and we'll be making recommendations to, the steering committee will be making recommendations to mayor and council. So, because there's not a third-party committee, there's not a separate committee. That's the way that I understand, and the purpose of setting up this committee is we're it.
Yes, Your Worship, the reason that language is written the way it is just because under the purchasing delegation bylaw, only council can make certain decisions, so that's why the committee, even though it's made up of all of mayor and council, it must make recommendations in some situations to council.
Okay, thank you. And I just want everybody that's listening to understand that we're the committee. Thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm looking at the mandate on page 46 as well. And what I want to know is if there needs to be an addition to this in order to make sure that our employees are included in a meaningful way in the discussions about the mandate to guide the development of the terms of reference. Or is that implicit in here that, in particular, the two unions that we have collective agreements with, and they will have particular language that we need to pay attention to, need to be alerted to, is that implicit in here, or do I need to propose some sort of amendment to it?
So, Your Worship, I think during your upcoming mandate discussion about the terms of reference, that likely is an appropriate place for council to have a discussion about what kind of committee, technical committee you would want from staff. Assuming the consultant's going to need a great deal of assistance, we would need to strike some balance between management and union representation, I believe, and that's up to council in order to provide information to the consultant and be involved. So that's up to council, but I would suggest that's part of your mandate discussion.
Okay, so that will happen with a facilitator then?
Your Worship, that's up to council. That's in your motion that you hire a consultant, and that'll be an open process when you have the consultant and anyone can attend. And that's when you would decide the terms of reference and possibly what kind of committee you'd like to help.
And who we will bring in for consultations as well. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. From my perspective, the first bullet captures our opportunity to be inclusive with other members of employee or stakeholders or otherwise, so develop the core services review mandate with the assistance of the consultant retained by council. And I trust that that will be the exercise in which we will go through and undertake to establish the terms of reference and the policy structure moving forward, where we'll discuss that very topic, I'm certain, among many others, to come up with our terms of reference. So I think it's captured in the first bullet.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. So just for clarity, I'll probably be repetitive here, that just for ourselves, is so council, Ms. Hartley, is, I mean, the council is the steering committee for the core service review, and the space in there that'll come under the terms of reference for other entities, representation, so admission staff, firefighters, RCMP, the staff that do the QP staff, management, and also maybe external parties, et cetera, from out in the city, business, industry, et cetera. So there is space for that. That's when we crystal clear for
Yes.
myself. I know you guys are.
Yes, and bullet number 6, for example, it says identify stakeholders in the core services review process, determine desired level of input, and establish timing and input mechanisms.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, no further speakers, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Number 8, corporate services. Number A, 2014-2018 financial plan amendment bylaw. To amend the 2014 financial plan to include the 2015 projects granted early approval at the 2015 January 12 and 2015 January 21 special committee of the whole meetings. The 2014-2018 financial plan bylaw was last amended on 2015 January 19. Staff recommendations on page 48 that council received for information the report pertaining to the financial plan amendment bylaw 2014 number 7197-04.
Move for receipt for information.
Mover for receipt. Seconder, Councillor Brennan. Discussion. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I realize that we're simply receiving this for receipt because in 2 previous budget meetings, we approved the early items that are disclosed here in this document, and there's 4 items that, for me, that I don't believe that needed to be undertaken. They cumulatively add up to what would be greater than, well, 1% of our annual operating budget. They are numbers 3, 6, 9, and 15. From my perspective, things that we didn't necessarily need to do. And again, I realize that we're doing this simply as receiving it for information, but I just want it to be perfectly clear to our citizens and those people that are watching that I wasn't in favor at the time, and I'm not in favor of them still, particularly in view of the fact that we're undertaking a core services review that may have had some influence on some of these. I will just ask one question. Number 6, transportation, sidewalks, power washing, downtown area, $50,000. Is that a contract or is that a service provided by our staff?
Sorry, Your Worship, I don't have that answer right now. I can provide it to council tomorrow.
Thank you.
Unless Mr. Hickey is here.
Thank you. If it is a contract service, I would like us to take into consideration whether or not we have Parks, Recreation, Environment staff and or Public Works staff or summer student staff that might be able to undertake a project of this nature as a typical service that we would do on an annual basis.
So, Your Worship, that's a very good question that is very topical for a core review on how we deliver the service. And if we are thinking of contracting in or contracting out, we should do that in a comprehensive fashion through the core review. Mr. Hickey?
Mayor, I could answer Councillor Beswick's question. That downtown sidewalk washing we do every second year. As you recall, Council enabled us to get that mini street sweeper about 6 years ago, so we use that effectively to keep the downtown clean. But every second year we do pressure wash. That goes out to tender. We get a contractor to do that. It's in the list here because we work to do it in the spring so that everything's fresh and ready to go for spring, summer, downtown.
Councillor Kett.
Yeah, this is the list we talked about that we could change later, but it's hard to change because these projects have to go on. I know this is slightly off topic on that, but could staff give me do I need to have a motion if I want to have an update on what is our surplus and how it would affect? I know we're just adopting what is on our list currently now, but I know on a previous agenda that we didn't get to, there was some surplus talked about, and there was 1.8 put towards capital reserve or asked for that, and 1 million to water supply. But there's a further 4.9 million in unallocated asset or surplus.
Your Worship, I can answer that. The full report on the surplus will be on next Monday's agenda, so all that information will be back in front of Council. I think what Councillor Kipp is thinking of in this particular case is what they call the accumulated surplus in the water fund was around $4.9 million. So that's money that has been accumulated but has not been allocated any specific reserve. That's not the surplus for the current year. That's what's been accumulated over time.
What is our surplus for last year's?
I think you had it quite accurate. I think it was about $3.6 million or $3.8 million in the general fund, of which we were recommending that 1.8 go to general capital, and there's about a $1 million surplus in the water fund.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pratt.
I just wanted to be clear that these, that we're taking for information tonight are ones that have already been approved, right? We did that previously. These are all expenses that have been approved by council?
Your Worship, I can speak to that. These projects were reviewed by Council at the special committee of the whole meetings that we held in the Services and Resource Centre. Coming out of those meetings, Council did direct staff to amend the budget for those projects, and the process that we're going through tonight is this report is for information only, but Council will be asked to provide 3 readings to the budget bylaw, because the budget bylaw is what gives Council and staff the authority to spend money. Without the bylaw, we technically don't have the authority in some cases to spend the money.
Thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I got Councillor Bestwick's list of items that he wasn't, he didn't support, and that was number 3, number 6, and I missed the third one.
4, 9, and 15.
Oh, 4, 9, and 15.
3, 6, 9, and 15, there was 4 items.
3, 6, 9, and 15. Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp raised an important notion that we can change any of these, although January 12th and 21st is the dates of the times in which we approved these. And my question to staff is on number 3, the waterfront remediation project is for the price of $400,000. Is that a project that is a must-do, that's an emergency, that if we don't do it now, we lose an opportunity of some other description? What's the urgency of this?
Your Worship, I believe we've actually acted on that project now.
Sorry, Your Worship, through Councillor Bestwick, if I understand the question was with respect to item 3, the $400,000 item, and whether we've acted on that. Do I have that correct? Yeah, so that item is specifically for the removal of what's called the old CP dock on the waterfront. And at this point, we've prepared the tender documents, but we have not yet released them. We have not gone to tender yet on that project.
Thank you. Follow up. How long has that dock been sitting there?
I would guess since the 40s, Your Worship.
And if it remained there for another piece of time, whatever that is, a year, what will the consequence be?
Your Worship, the staff's approach to this has been simply to try to remove some of the barriers that exist for the redevelopment of our waterfront lands. Using that portion of the property for waterfront access, whether it be a future docking facility, the CP dock in the existing condition cannot be rehabilitated. It needs to be removed. The advice that we were given was the best time to do that was early in this year for a few reasons. So that was one of the reasons. That was why we put it on for early approval.
With the assumption that there would be access, that would be a barrier to an access to something?
Your Worship, there is actually some in-camera issues associated with the strategy on why and the timing of this that we should probably talk about. We did talk about before, but I'd like to remind council about it.
Okay, so thank you. So I'll be very careful. I think I've been careful so far.
It's just that we can't answer your question directly because of the issue.
Okay, thank you. And I won't get into a debate with you, of course, but when it's in open and the project name is Waterfront Remediation Project and it's a community development project and it's identified at $400,000 expenditure, and it's an open.
And Your Worship,
so it's difficult for me to not ask questions that I think are relevant and pertinent.
And I apologize, Your Worship, we did, but the strategy that we laid out for council before you actually made the approval is why I'm suggesting we'll have to go back and talk about that if that's not clear for you, and we can talk more about that in camera.
Okay, I can't remember, thank you. I can't remember if this was January 12th or 21st or both, that this $400,000 line item in open was also discussed, maybe not to the depth of detail that you're making reference to, and the strategy that was identified to initiate this expenditure. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the motion to receive? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Opposed by Councillor Yoakum, Councillor Bestwick. Carried.
That was just to receive.
Correct. So the next one is on the bylaw. Motion that the financial plan amendment bylaw 2015-7197.04 to amend Schedule A to include 2015 projects granted early approval past first reading. Do I have a mover? Councillor Pratt, seconder. Councillor Brennan. Discussion. Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp, Bestwick, and Yoakum opposed. Motion carries. Motion that financial plan amendment bylaw 2015 number 7197-04 pass second reading. Any speakers? Seeing none, I call the question. Oh, pardon me. I need a mover and a seconder. I'm sorry. Councillor Pratt and Councillor Thorpe. I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Yoakum, Bestwick, and Kipp opposed. Motion carries. Motion that financial plan amendment bylaw 2015 number 7197.04 pass third reading. Do I have a motion? Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. I'm voting against this currently. I just wanted people to understand my reasoning is that going over some of the projects in there. For example, Councillor Bestwick brought up item number 9, which is the arena boards in Bevan Park. Went out and looked at it and played in the arena for quite a few years, haven't played for a couple of years. Went and looked at the boards and just thought, wow, that's $200,000 we want to spend now on new boards in that arena. And it just didn't seem like it needed it. So there's a few of the issues in there that I had a chance, we couldn't change them, so it's tough for me to support the budget when I'm looking to try and make cuts and save some of the budgeting when we're at $200 million plus our $16 million or more for RDN. One of the reasons I vote against it is some of those issues that we just can't seem to change. So, I could see, $25,000 worth of maintenance and repairs. I know they flip the plywood over, the edging, a few screws get loose. I don't know if there's claims against it. I don't hear any of that, but those are the type of issues that I can't seem to change. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Similar to Councillor Kipp, these are simply early intake approvals that add up to in the neighborhood of just over $4 million, some of which I think could be referred to future years and/or not at all, and/or other users that might need access to certain things, if something's in the way, that they might be a partner in an obligation to pay for some of these things, or not do them at all. And it's for those reasons that I won't be able to support the motion in front of us. Thank you.
Councillor Yocum.
Thank you, Your Worship. My reasoning is I'm concerned about the, at this point, the minimal 5% tax increase that's going to come, I think, around 2017 in our budget. So I'd like us to have a real conversation, not be creating a plan that's so far ahead, because we got to really get serious thinking about not increases that high. We've heard me harp about that numerous times. So that's the reason I'm opposing this plan. Like Councillor Kipp said, it may be say we can change it, but we'll see if we can change it. So those are my reasons of this, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm supporting this because I don't want the city to get hung up on not getting work started. So there are some things that I don't approve on this list, but I'm hoping that what we've discussed, that we can bring this back when we are doing our budgeting and our planning sessions, which I hope will be soon. So I actually just want the city to start working, so I don't want to be postponing anything too long, because I know that there are some things on here that need to be done, and to shoot down an entire process here for a couple of items, I think doesn't seem to make sense to me. So, I will be bringing some of these items up again when we do talk about budgets. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Just to Councillor Hong, Mr. Lindsay expressed that we have the request for the RFP for the removal of the dock, the wharf. And once that goes out, once that starts, there's no turning back. There's no stopping. So there's many items on this list, be it that I do support, but there's several that I don't. And I'm very happy to make a motion to remove, because that is the way that we have an opportunity to change things. We have to make a motion here at this table. And I'm very comfortable to make a motion to remove certain items from this list. And I've thought about, on many occasions, making changes to this list in the last 4 weeks, since January 12th and 21st, fully acknowledging and recognizing that we have 8 people here, and fully acknowledging and recognizing where I believe, because it's been said there's a motion that Councillor Bestwick hasn't made as it relates to a certain topic. Well, Councillor Bestwick wants to make that motion, but Councillor Bestwick needs to know that there's an odd number of people sitting at this table in order to make that motion. So I fear that a motion that I might make to remove an item for $400,000 or $200,000 would be defeated on a tie vote. I could roll the dice, I could double down and put all my chips in, but my guess is that it would be defeated. So that's why I haven't done that to date on these items, and one other item that is floating out there in the social media world. So I'm in contemplation, Your Worship, about making that motion, or a motion, to postpone the 2 items on the agenda, one being the removal of the dock and the other being the replacement of the Cliff McNabb Arena dasher boards, until further notice.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Gord, turn off the TV, get better, get back here soon, thanks. That's it. Sorry.
Thank you.
That's in the form of a motion.
That's in the form of a motion. Do you have a seconder?
Your worship, there's a motion on the floor
Well, there's a motion
for third reading.
For third reading.
I don't, no, we've got a motion on the floor. So we need to defeat that motion, which is the financial plan amendment bylaw third reading. So I would say we would proceed with that.
Is it possible to have an amendment to a third reading?
Council could amend the bylaw and then give it third reading as amended. The question on the floor right now is, there's already a motion, so what do you want to do with the current motion on the floor for third reading?
Amend it?
Trying to think procedurally how to properly do this. Given third reading, if council was to defeat third reading, then what you could do is introduce a motion to amend and then consider third reading again as amended.
So the motion needs to be defeated in order to amend the motion?
You would defeat third reading, give consideration of amendment, and then proceed with third reading as amended.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So the motion is on the floor. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I would urge this council to approve these expenditures in this budget, because in this sort of piece of the budget, there's always things that are not going to sit well with everyone, but we're charged with coming to agreement on how we will spend taxpayers' dollars. And I think that sometimes you need to understand that some of these expenditures are important to some of us, and some of them aren't as important to others. But we have to come to some consensus, but we are only 8 of us. And so I think we need to behave, for want of a better word, we're just going to have to behave in a cooperative manner. And we're going to have to acknowledge that some things are important to some and not to others, but this is probably our best stab at it. If there's just a few things that you're not entirely satisfied with, then let's go ahead and approve this, which we have been working on for a long time now, and it's probably as good as it's going to get with us in terms of our agreement on things. So I would just urge you to just take that road and move forward and start getting some things done. And once you have the core review underway, then you can talk about how a council would evaluate things like the boards at the arena. But I think that it's time that we just buckled down and got to work. I think that's what people expect of us.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. On comment to Councillor Brandon's thing is, I'm not really interested in taking too many stabs and coming back, because it seems to always have a negative consequence. And I don't want the core review to be the end-all of all our solutions. I think at this rate, it's not going to happen until next year. So I would actually still like to make decisions with this council without relying on the core review as much as everybody seems that we're going at. So I'm willing to accept Councillor Bestwick's demotion, because those are the two things. Like I've visited those arenas, and I say, if we're not doing anything with the waterfront, why can't we wait in a year? I understand some of these things need to be done, and I want to move on forward with these, but a dock that sits there that's not going to do anything with us for $400,000, that's 0.5%. So if we're following Councillor Kipp's motion, reducing 2%, that's already a quarter of the way there. Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to follow up from Councillor Brennan, I hear that we have to move forward in some projects, but also I heard the people want us to be on the same page, et cetera. I understand and respect all that. I'm more than willing to be on a team, et cetera. But my first priority is to, I made it crystal clear during the campaign, is to be part of the process of controlling expenditures of the city. The spending costs have been extreme over the last numerous years, and I do not feel guilty or bad. They're trying to work on behalf of the people of the city to keep our spending in control. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Oh, I just want to say there's already been worry expressed about next year's budget. And when you take an expenditure from this year's budget that necessarily has to be done at some point and move it into next year's budget, that's how you get those lumps, like that 5%. You don't actually avoid spending money. You just push it off to the next year, and then it sits out there with you worrying about it next year. In my view, you're better off to smooth these things out, do them as they come up, and you know, I would expect, like everything else, if you move removal of the docks to 2016 or 17, that is just going to cost you more. We can afford this in this budget with, in fact, a 0% increase in our operations, save for 1% that we're putting away for asset management. And that is probably the best you're going to see across this province. But if you start whittling away and pushing things into next year's budget, what you'll do is you'll do a great job this year and sort of be the lighthouse for the rest of the province, and then boom, you're into next year and you are really a loser. You're down there. You got a 5-6% increase now. It's really, I think, better to smooth things out.
Mr. Swaby?
Sorry, Your Worship. I'm looking at the chart that we provided on page 50, and it indicates to me that neither of those projects that you're discussing is funded from general taxation, so that won't have any impact on the tax rate in 2015.
Okay. Or this year? Yes. So it doesn't increase our taxes.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be voting to support third reading of this bylaw. I think we need to move ahead with this business, and especially hearing the news that Mr. Swaby has just given us, that adds to the reasons for my belief. I hear Councillor Yoakum's concern about tax rates several years down the road, and I think I share Councillor Brennan's view that it's like ongoing maintenance. You can spend a little bit now, or you can do nothing, and then you'll have to spend a lot more down the road. And I would rather see us address these issues now and maintain a very, very moderate tax increase in our budget as we have proposed. So I will support this third reading. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I agree with Diana, Councillor Brannon's comment that we're going to have to get caught up to these eventually one of these years. But I also wanted to point out to everybody that we had a $2.8 million surplus. So we can still tighten our belts and still probably come out ahead. Like, you know, with the increases that we had last year, we still ended up with a 2.8%. I'd like to have zero surplus. I like actually to do our jobs well, that we have good foresight in what we're doing and understand what we're doing, so we don't have to have a surplus every year, and now we have the question before us, what are we going to do with this money? I don't like that. I like to budget it so we can actually do what we've said we've done and spent every dime that we've budgeted, so we know that we've done the best that we can. Leaving a $2 million surplus or a deficit isn't very good planning on our part, so I would like us to work together with staff and everybody else to see what we can do. Worst case scenario, I will agree to this, but I will be bringing some of these items back when we do budget discussions. So I am for moving forward with the city, but there are some things on there that concern me that we don't need to do. Thank you.
What if I just might ask Mr. Clement's question? If, as it stands right now, depending upon where you're taking from reserves or putting to reserves, we could easily come to a zero surplus. Am I correct?
Your Worship, are you asking me if accounting is an exact science or if it's an art? We'll have a much more discussion, a better discussion of the surplus next week when we have the report in front of us. One of the challenges we have as an organization with spending every dollar that's in our budget is that we never have 100% staffing. A lot of our surplus comes from the fact that we budget for positions to be filled and they simply aren't for whatever reason, like somebody leaves, there's turnover, and that accounts for a large part of the surplus. Another large part of the surplus comes from some things that we have difficulty predicting, like our RCMP contract expenses, which is our largest single expense. So I think that it's unlikely, as much as I would agree with Councillor Hong that I would like to be perfect and spend every dollar we plan to do everything we actually plan to do. We're a large, complex operation, and there's going to be and we do budget a little bit conservatively, so we're always going to have some level of surplus, I think. And one of the things that Council needs to be reminded of, I think, is that surplus goes into reserves. Those reserves are used for projects which reduce future taxation. So, for example, the money that we spent on Langley Valley last year all came from reserves. Those reserves all came from previous surpluses. So what's, I think, really important for Council is that they reviewed the budget and the city's operations. They're happy with what we're doing, and we will do our best to manage those as accurately as we can.
I guess what I was trying to ask was, at getting towards this time of the year, when you see that you're going to have a surplus, we could just as easily reallocate and not withdraw from reserves and leave the money in reserves and instead use the surplus.
So, Your Worship, that is what Mr. Clemens was talking about. The discussion next week, that'll be very valuable, because yes, we can go to zero for our budget by using reserves, or surplus, I'm sorry. As long as we have the same surplus next year, there's not much of an impact. But if you don't have the same surplus next year, the jump to get back to the budgeted amount is substantial. So yes, you can do it. Other communities are doing it, and it's one way that you could reduce the taxes this year.
And then I just wanted to recognize something that Councillor Yoakum has brought up numerous times, and that's 2017. That is the that is the staffing of the new fire hall that predominantly provides that. So if we don't go ahead with a new fire hall, then we won't see that? Am I correct in that?
That's one of the largest drivers of the increase that year. I believe, if I remember correctly, it also includes costs related to the staffing plan for the RCMP, but I'm 100%. I can confirm that for next week.
I believe it does, Your Worship, because currently we eliminated 3 from this year, and it, of course, just pushes it back.
So predominantly protective services.
Yeah, and the other additional cost was that we have plans to construct a new police station. At some point, we would borrow money and pay down the debt on that.
Thank you. Councillor Hong. You finished? You're still up here.
Oh, I'm finished. Sorry.
Okay. Councillor Kemp.
Well, thank you. Regarding the budget and smoothing it out, that's what reserves and surplus does. And they come from overtaxation and lack of spending. So the projects don't get spent on, so we have a surplus. The reserves get taken up every year so we can pay out in the future. In the last years, we switched kind of how we did some of that by this asset management program that's caused us the 1% bump that we've had, and I've never said it's enough. So reserves and surplus come from taxation typically, and which makes up about 60% of our overall budget. Prioritizing it would be important, and when we don't get something done sometimes, it doesn't get done for a year, priorities may change, and we do that all the time. So from my perspective, I hear we shouldn't micromanage, and then when we ask for a base reduction, say 2%, like I said, oh no, come on, give us, what do you want? Like, I've heard comments saying, well, you can't just say that, you got to give them what you want to cut. Well, then I get told it's micromanaging. So we offer up a couple of things because we know, I mean, I've been smashed into the hockey boards, I guess, enough times. I know good boards and bad boards, just as an experience. So when I look at it, some of our budget kicks are, and I have them in front of us, the property tax, and that's in our financial plan. 2017 is 3 police officers, 3 in 15, 4 in 16, 3, and 5 in 18, 4. Fire department, 10 and 10 in 16 and 17. So things are going up and prices are going up. And I guess for me, just not being able to adjust anything Like right now, we could give 0 and 0 for the next 2 years by just putting the capital reserve into the taxes and into asset management, and a lot of people would be happy. So from my perspective, I have trouble supporting this because I have trouble affecting the projects, and that's my concern why I can't support it. And flattening it out and smoothing it out, that is the resources that are the reserves that we gather in the surplus. That's what's supposed to do that. But when we're putting more and more away every year, what percentage of reserves are we putting away, Mr. Clemens, this year? Do you know what percentage of our budget is reserves?
No, I'm sorry, I don't have that information off the top of my head. And
I have 92 million in taxes, 36 million user fees. Other is 27 million, and only 2.4 on borrowing. So would that come into the other then?
that would be included, reserves would be included there along with others. Yeah, there are a lot of other revenue sources in there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further speakers, I call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Yocum, Bestwick, and Kipp opposed. Motion carries. Item number B, Regional District of Nanaimo bylaws, Southern Community Transit Service Area Amendment Bylaw number 1230.05, 2015, and Liquid Waste Management Planning Service Amendment Bylaw number 1543.01, 2015. Recommendations on page 54 that Council consent to the adoption of the Regional District of Nanaimo Southern Community Transit Service Area Amendment Bylaw, and that the Regional District of Nanaimo be notified accordingly. Do we have a mover? So moved. Councillor Thorpe, seconder. Councillor Pratt. Speakers, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Page 54, discussion, point 1, Southern Community Transit Service Area Amendment Bylaw. Proposed to increase the maximum amount that may be requisitioned for the service from $2,808,160 or .512 per thousand of assessment to the greater of $9,215,000 or .63 per thousand of assessment. I would just ask for, if Mr. Clemens could just please provide me with some clarity on this number. Could go from 2.8 to 9.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll do my best. In the regional district world, they have to adopt service area bylaws for each of the services that they have. And as part of their service area bylaws, they include budget limits that are expressed as either the higher of a dollar value or a tax rate. That's their dollars per thousand of taxable value. In the case of the Southern Community Transit, they've long exceeded their dollar value for many years, but they've never gotten to the point where they were going to exceed the tax rate portion of it. And in fact, they don't exceed it in 2015. It may or may not happen in the next couple of years, but they're getting close to that area. So as part of amending the bylaw, they need the approval of all the municipalities that are members of that service area. So that's what these reports are requesting. The thresholds for the two service areas where the city consent is being requested are not exceeded in 2015, but they may in the future years. So the council members who sit as directors have actually already approved the 5-year financial plan for the regional district, which include the requisitions that these are made up of. So in fact, what they're doing now is some housekeeping that would allow them to amend their bylaws so that they would be in compliance in future years of their financial plan.
Thank you. So, the reason for my question is because over the course of the next 5 years, as you indicate, 2015, because 2015 has been split with in transit in terms of their hires and service area that they're going to service up to 5,000 hours, additional hours of service. And in 2016, 17, 18 is definitively when it's going to, so this triggers that. Like this triggers the growth, because as soon as in the gates, in the starting gates, and we've taken off, it's really hard, as it's been explained before, to stop something when it's in motion. And I'm not convinced that, or I'm not certain that we've approved we have a transit meeting tomorrow at noon, and I'm not certain that we've approved the transit plan for the next 5 years. And I sit on that committee. I know that I haven't supported it. I guess maybe that's what I'm thinking.
Your Worship, I believe the regional district report's attached, which was January 14th of 2015.
Page 55.
Your Worship, one further comment is that it's actually the other way around. This follows the growth, not the growth follows this. They're experiencing the growth, need the money to pay for the services, to actually requisition from the municipalities to pay for the infrastructure that accommodates the growth.
Cool. Any other speakers? Seeing none, I call the question. On item number 1, consent to the adoption of Regional District Southern Community Transit Service Area Amendment Bylaw 1230.05, 2015, and that the Regional District of Land be notified accordingly. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Bestwick opposed. Motion carries. Next item, number 2, that council consent to the adoption of the Regional District of Nanaimo Liquid Waste Management Planning Service Bylaw 1543.01, 2015, and that the Regional District of Nanaimo be notified accordingly. Do I have a mover? Councillor Hong, seconded. Councillor Brennan. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Bestwick opposed. Motion carries. Item C, council meetings and agenda circulation times. Council Procedure Amendment Bylaw 2015, number 7060-03. The purpose is to obtain council approval to amend the Council Procedure Bylaw 2007, number 7060, to reflect an increase in the time between regular meeting agenda publication and the meeting day, as well as changing the date of the inaugural council meeting to November. Staff recommendations on page 62. The motion is that council give first, second, and third readings to Council Procedure Bylaw number 2015-7060-03 and refer the bylaw to public notification. Do we have a mover? Move. Seconder? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Brennan, thank you. Discussion. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. Can I refer to page 64? Is that part of this? On page 64, the bullet, second from the bottom, by 4 p.m. Friday, 3 days prior to the meeting, the amended agenda is published. Is that to be an addendum or an agenda? Because that says an amended agenda.
It'd be the addendum.
Green sheets.
Yes.
Okay, but that says the whole amended agenda and not just notification of the changes, because I thought the council voted, except for a couple of members, that be called an addendum.
You're right, that is the new practice, and it's poor use of word on my part. It's the addendum. Your Worship.
Thank you. One follow-up on it. As one of the people who brought forward this change earlier and was defeated on it, one of my main concerns was to take the work of council away from the weekend and make it so it worked on the weekday. And this, again, we'll be getting an addendum sheet to our agenda on Friday, giving us more time over the weekend to review agendas. And because the way it's separated, it wasn't for me just a matter of more time between the agendas, it was the access, the flow of information, so I can't support the bylaw as presented now.
Would that not be, by having the main agenda published on Tuesday afternoon, would that not give us more time 2 more days?
Well, if I can follow up, I wanted to separate between RDN and city by my motion before by separating a few days out between the meetings so it's not stacked, giving us more Monday meetings or less Monday meetings and more Thursday meetings, which is my point of view on it. And so all this does is just moves up where we got it. It didn't facilitate weekend work, Monday after the weekend, council agenda, those type of things. So it just didn't facilitate it for me.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of clarification, if I may ask, please. Page 62 on our agenda, item A, subsection 1, agendas published by 12 noon on Tuesday. And then over on page 64, it indicates on one of the bullets 4 p.m. Tuesday. Is the 4 p.m. time the correct one?
Yes, so council gave direction to make it noon. What I'm recommending is 4 p.m. on the Tuesday rather than noon for a number of reasons, but it's really a physical capacity to print agendas. And if we're going to have the mayor's meeting in the morning, then we would need that time. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to succeed at really publishing the agendas and having them posted. So thank you for pointing that out, Councillor Thorpe. That is one of the changes, or the only change, is rather than noon, it'd be 4 p.m.
Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Certainly my preference was to hold our meetings on Thursdays for all of the reasons that were provided in the outline. And my question to staff is, it seemed like the primary reason why we couldn't hold them on Thursdays was Shaw could not accommodate the live TV broadcast because of programming conflicts. So I'm curious as to whether or not if we provide them with enough advance notice, that being 12 months, if they when they do their scheduling on an annual or semi-annual or however they do their scheduling, if we could go to their scheduler and ask if that was an option for the Mondays to be Thursdays. And if that's something that requires a motion, or it certainly isn't to limit what we provide to the viewer or the citizens. It's, again, and that was the primary reason that I heard, that we chose or voted not to do Thursdays. So I'm just wondering, can we check with Shaw when they're doing their scheduling?
Certainly, Worship. So what I'd suggest if council wanted to do that is after first reading, once this motion's been dealt with, then you could instruct staff to do that. I'm a little reluctant just to go ahead and do it based on deliberations. I'd look for council direction on give them a call. And the other part is I understand that council wishes to revisit this over the next, probably later this year. And that opportunity will come up as council sets the schedule for next year's meetings. So there would be the opportunity as well. So I could plant the seed now and then look to have Shaw consider that over the next while, if that's council's direction.
Thanks. I just wouldn't want to miss the window of opportunity to discuss this with Shaw and say, well, we just finished redoing our schedule for 2016 and you're too late. Thank you.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you, Your Worship. Like everybody else, I would have preferred Thursdays, but I think this is a good step forward, giving us more time. A question to staff is, can we limit the amount of addendums items? Is that possible? Because I fear what Councillor Kipp is, we're going to get loaded for the weekend again, so if 6 items end up popping up, is there a limit that we can reduce it to?
Certainly wouldn't want to see a council get loaded. But on that, I think what council could consider is, with the elective and essential items, that's the part that I wanted to bring back to council for some discussion, because I don't feel I have enough to go on with that. Now, when I refer to elective and essential items, it's in the procedure bylaw, and it says only additions to a late agenda should be within these definitions. And frankly, they're quite vague, and they are very open, and it's always proper for council to add anything. However, when I look to that part, that's instructing me of what you would like to see added to an agenda after it's been posted and published. So I'd be looking for council to give some principles or framework criteria on which I have to go on, so that when an addendum comes forward, it's within your direction as you've set in advance. So that's the second motion, or the fourth motion after consideration of readings.
Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Pratt.
I just wanted to reiterate, when I made the motion to stick with Mondays, that the original intent of the discussion was that we were working too hard on weekends, and because the agenda was coming out late on Thursdays. And regardless of that, we would still end up with addendums. So this has solved that problem by moving it back to Tuesdays for the original agenda, and then to get the addendums by Friday for Monday, which we were getting on Monday. This is a much better way of doing it. So I really feel we've accomplished what we set out to do. And I do understand some of the other points around Thursday and some of the benefits of possibly having it on a Thursday eventually. But I think this solves what we were looking for originally, and I will be supporting the bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I agree with Councillor Pratt. What happens in the future regarding our meeting dates, well, that's in the future. In the meantime, for the shorter term, I think this was a good compromise, and I think it does achieve certainly part of what we wanted to achieve, and that is give us a bit more time to examine the agenda items. So I'll support this.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. I'm supporting this as I did. I think it meets the objective as set out. With regard to the addendums and asking our staff to vet them, that makes me, I'm a little cautious on that. But I look at the addendum here, and I can't imagine what is particularly onerous on this addendum. This addendum says that we would add Mr. Robert Fuller to the Core Services Review Steering Committee discussion, that we would remove 485 Pine for building deficiencies. So that's just strike it out. Remove 2404 York Crescent. That's just strike it out. There's nothing for us to do or study up on. The correspondence from the Colliery Dam Preservation Society, that would be a delegation, adding a delegation. So there's nothing onerous on this. There's nothing that's added to our work for today. In fact, it's taken some things off our agenda. So I'm not sure that we're really characterizing the added agenda items properly. And as for weekends, my understanding, the logic that I don't understand is those people who work, I would think that the Mondays to Fridays are their busy times, that they're at their jobs, that they're putting in the time, that they're working in the evenings, and that they would appreciate being able to set that aside until the weekend and go over the agendas. So certainly that would have been my preference when I held a job outside of council. So while I appreciate that some people have said these things, for me, they don't hold a lot of weight. I think that this, backing it up, is a good idea. But I think we can handle addendums that remove things. And I think that when you're a councillor, or when you run for council, you know what your work is. You know that you've got a day job and you're working Monday to Friday, and you are saying to the public, I'm committing that I'm going to take on this work on your behalf. So.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. Well, my point on addendum was that the staff didn't have to change the whole agenda and put the little pieces in, and I could never find them. There was no highlighting, no italics, no finding. Had to search through the original agenda, and then I used to come here and get 10 pages and transfer my notes. So for me, My personal preference is that. And being a self-employed individual, the weekends for me were really productive. I could work all weekend drawing and designing and get them in for Monday printing, working all nights and that. And I know Councillor Hong works weekends, has children. Mr. Yoakum has children, young kids, so weekends are when the kids are home. And I try to make it like a business meeting and not working all week on council stuff. And yeah, I took on the job and I know my workload. I understand it, but I never worked that day shift, that Monday to Friday. So it was easier for me to think weekends should be free to do what you want in family time. So you've made your point, and I disagree with it. As far as onerous work for staff to change the agenda versus an addendum, yeah, this is a simple one, but we've had big ones. We've had 1,000-page minutes, and to change the whole 1,000 pages to find the 3 or 4 things in it was really not a smart move. So that's why I really support this. To have those 4 things changed in the whole agenda package is what I said was onerous, but obviously you disagree with that.
Okay, Councillor Pratt.
I'm wondering if we could call the question at this point.
Yes, I just want one clarification for Mr. Jackson before we do. Item number 2 under your recommendations relative to essential and elective, is that bound within the bylaws that we need to give consideration to? Consider that question before, or can we do the 1, 2, and 3 readings?
No, they're separate. So you could consider the bylaw in 1, 2, 3 readings.
Okay.
And then the question is, what do you want to do or direct staff to do to create this definition of what elective and essential would be?
Okay,
and that could be separate.
We'll do the three readings then, certainly. Okay, so the motion, the Council Procedure Amendment Bylaw 2015 number 7060.03 to amend the Council Procedure Bylaw past first reading. Do I have a mover? Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Pratt. Any further discussion? You're done? Okay, thank you. I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp opposed. Motion carries. Motion, the Council Procedure Amendment Bylaw 2015 number 7060.03 pass second reading. Do I have a mover? Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Pratt for seconder. No discussion, no speakers. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp opposed. Motion carries. That Council Procedure Amendment Bylaw 2015 number 7060.03 pass third reading. Do we have a mover? Councillor Thorpe and Pratt. No discussion. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp opposed. Motion carries. Number D, City of Nanaimo 2014 General Local Election Campaign. Oh, I'm sorry, apologies. Number 2, motion that Council provide direction to staff regarding rewording. So we need, we'll need some direction is basically what you're looking for, am I correct?
That's correct, Your Worship. So this is something, if you were inclined, I could include as an agenda item on a committee of the whole meeting, which has more of that workshop feel.
Yes.
But that's up to council's pleasure if you want to give direction tonight instead.
Okay. Do we have a motion to refer to a committee of the whole meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Second. Second. Okay, Councillor Bestwick second. Councillor Pratt moving the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Very good, thank you. Now we go on to D. City of Nanaimo 2014 General Local Election Campaign Financing Disclosure Statements. Purpose is to comply with provincial law by providing council with the name of candidates from the City of Nanaimo 2014 general local election who have not yet filed their campaign financing disclosure statements with Elections BC. Staff recommendation that council receive for information the report pertaining to the City of Nanaimo 2014 general local election campaign finance disclosure statements. Do I have a mover? Councillor Bestwick, second by Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Development permit number DP 883 at 476 Nottingham Drive. Purpose is to obtain council authorization to issue a development permit to allow final approval of a 9-lot subdivision. Staff recommendation Motion that council issue a development permit at 476 Nottingham Drive to permit a 9-lot subdivision with one variance to reduce the watercourse setback to 3.6 meters. Do I have a mover?
So moved.
Councillor Kipp. Seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Seeing no speakers, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Development permit number DP 884, 850, and 870 Jackson Road. To obtain council authorization to issue a development permit for a truck terminal with one variance. Staff recommendation that council issue development permit 884 at 850, 870 Jackson Road with one variance to reduce the watercourse setback to 0 meters. Councillor Bestwick, Councillor Kipp. Do you want to speak on it, Councillor Bestwick? Okay. Seeing no speakers, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Development permit number DP 923 at 3602 Place Road. And staff recommendations on page 110. Motion that council issue development permit number 923 at 3602 Place Road with one variance to reduce the watercourse setback to 10.6 meters. Do I have a mover? So moved. Councillor Kipp, seconded by Councillor Hong. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just for clarification, the deck that's mentioned, the sun deck, it would remain the same size, is that correct? It's not an additional building?
Your Worship, that is correct. There's a drawing of the proposal on page 114 of your agenda, and it is in fact simply a replacement, a repair of an existing deck, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Seeing no further speakers, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Lindley Valley Urban Reserve Area Plan. And the purpose is to provide information and obtain council direction with respect to a request from property owners in the north portion of Lindley Valley Urban Reserve. And there's a motion under Part A and Part B. First one is to support in principle that the Lindley Valley Area Plan, as anticipated by the official community plan, can proceed as separate area plans for Lindley Valley North and Lindley Valley South. And B, to support the owner's request to advance a Lindley Valley Area North plan at this time and at the owner's cost.
So moved.
So moved. Seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Thank you. I just need some Mr. Lindsay, if you could just provide me, this is the first time for me to see an urban reserve designation split, and now to be referenced as Lindley Valley North and Lindley Valley South. So when I was reviewing this file, and then for me to try to discern on, what literally that I'm being asked to do is to advance the official community plan by 3 or 4 years so that the developer it must bring forward a comprehensive plan of Lindley Valley North, as it's referred to as. So I'm all over the place, I get that, I'm sorry, but this is the first time that I've sat here and for this request that I can recall, or a request like this.
I think there's a couple of questions in there that I'd like to comment and respond on, and maybe to help on page 126 of your agenda is probably a good place to start. And we see there are a couple of maps in terms of how the OCP existed at the time it was adopted in 2008 is the top map, and everything that's in that brown color are all the lands that were designated urban reserve at that time. So we're talking about basically all of the Lindley Valley, all of the lands west of Caudle Lake Park. all of the large acreages that remained in the valley at that time. What changed substantially was last year when the city bought the vast majority of the valley. So if you look at the drawing, which is called Map 3, we now see all that area that was in brown. A good portion has now been shaded green, which designates the area as park under the official community plan. So in 2008, the idea was that there would be one comprehensive plan done for this entire area, and that was shown as being a medium to long-term objective, so that could be 2018 to 2028. So the first part about what we're talking about tonight is because of all of the park dedication, all of the park the city acquired, amended, protected by bylaw, it's really separated out the valley now in terms of what's left. There's the bit along the top, what we're calling the Lindley Valley North, and there's the bit on the south, Lindley Valley South. And while when it was all one large area, it probably made some sense to go forward as a comprehensive plan with a significant separation of the parkland. Now we think there is some merit when it comes time to do the plan to look at these areas separately. The second part of your question dealing with the timing, as I mentioned, the OCP right now says that these are medium long-term objectives to do a plan for this. So there's a number of neighborhood plans and area plans and town center plans that are identified in the OCP, all with shorter time frames than this one. This one is longer term. What's happened here is that the owner of one of the properties has come forward and is asking for permission to advance the plan in advance of the schedule that's laid out in the official community plan. So what that would mean is it would jump in front of a number of other area plans and town center plans that are in the planning document, that are in the official community plan, and that what they're proposing is that they would pay for the cost of that plan. There would still, what I want to be clear on, there still would be staff time to assist in managing that project, and it would put call to bear resources from the planning department to support that. I'm not sure if I answered all your questions or not.
I don't know how you remember any of my questions, actually, because they're not really very good questions. I'm concerned about the volume of density occurring as a result, potentially, and how, because one thing triggers another thing. So when we start to trigger spending money in particular and sending people off to do work and spend money, it often lost in there is the trigger of transportation or the trigger of more works and services that we're approving tonight that I don't realize that I'm approving moving forward, if that makes any sense. So could you help me with that?
I think what I would say to that, Your Worship, is really, you're correct. This is really the first step in terms of opening these lands to development. They're right now in reserve lands, which means they can be developed under existing zoning, which is essentially 5-acre parcels. But by moving forward with a neighborhood plan, it recognizes that what you would be saying is it's now time to develop these properties. We're moving it ahead in terms of the schedule. The schedule right now is 2018 and beyond. But with a motion to proceed, you're really talking about taking these lands out of the urban reserve, making them available for development, and you're correct. That would go with that would be all the discussions about how do you service the lands, both hard and soft servicing for these properties, and what are the implications on the existing infrastructure. You're absolutely correct.
And just my final question, the rezoning portion from 5-acre to RS1 designation, is that what we're speaking to here?
No, Your Worship. This is like so this would be the first step in amending the official community plan. So it would move then from an urban reserve designation to a neighborhood, and it would have in it this neighborhood plan, which would help to inform the zoning process, but that would really be the next major step here. This would first be an OCP amendment.
Thank you.
Councilor Brannan.
I'm speaking against this motion. We have an official community plan, and it sets out for us what we want our city to look like now and in the future. And in that plan, we have urban reserves, and they it says here in my notes that they assist the city to manage growth. So I'm just not of the opinion that that we don't have sufficient areas that are already designated for development now, that we don't have enough to satisfy the needs. And I would think that we did this on a medium to long-range objective because of that very thing, that we have enough lots to service the demand. Whether or not the developer thinks he can fill these houses, we as a city have said we want to do this in a more thoughtful way. And so I think that given those things, plus given the that our staff is already busy, I'm going to say, has at least adequate work on their plates, that this would add to, and it would add to our staff without demonstrating that there is a need. And in fact, it actually contradicts what we have already said through consultation with our community for development of the official community plan. We've already said that this should be longer time out. So I can't support changing it.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I also have a problem with this notion of this development basically jumping the queue for what I can see is no real good reason. We do have land ready for development on a short-term basis. And this was identified as a medium to long-term goal. I don't see a reason why it should be bumped up, especially when there will be ramifications in terms of transportation, utilities, and so on. So unless I can be convinced that there's some good reason for bumping this project up, I would not support it.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of questions here. How many houses are they going to roughly build in this development that he's talking about? And are we talking about just the north, or are we actually going to change the south to an urban, or leave that as an urban reserve?
So it's probably easier to answer the second question first, and it's really the focus this evening is on the northern half. The approach would be, under option one, would be to go ahead, separate these areas out, but to focus a planning exercise on the north only at this time. The southern areas would still remain in urban reserve. The second question, in terms of how many units are we talking about there, is certainly a little bit more difficult, because this is why we would go through this planning process. There'd be an environmental assessment, you'd look at the topography, all those limitations on this property. Well, what I would say is, on a property of this size, you're talking, or an area of this size, you're talking about 56 hectares, about 140 acres, all that land in the north. Just based on modest density, you could look at somewhere between 500 and 750 units in that area, but I'd have to put a real asterisk on that. That's just real general numbers.
Okay, great. Follow up on that? Thank you. Is this going to bleed into Rutherford Road? Is that what they're planning is?
So, Your Worship, ultimately a lot of the traffic that would come out of here would ultimately find its way down to Lost Lake Road, and those people that wanted to head to Woodgrove or head west absolutely would find their way through Rutherford or down to Hammond Bay Road, yes.
Thank you. So we've got staff recommendation is either or. I apologize. It's looking for direction on either number one, that support it or that they not support. So we'll need a motion for one of those two.
Your Worship, it's my understanding that the motion for 1A and B are currently on the table on the floor.
That was now the motion on the floor, is it not?
That is.
Okay, thank you. All right, so all those, Councillor Kemp, I'm sorry.
Can I, page 134 is the map with the yellow and green. And staff talking in the first part is to use the western portion of what's called the proposed northwest study area. That's the first one. And this is now in the OCP to be done in 2018.
So, Your Worship, the map on page 134 is actually a map that was done by the applicants, but the proposal, item 1, would be to do a study area for all of the areas in yellow, both the northwest and northeast. Staff have identified as sort of the north and south. They further went and said, well, there's sort of a northeast and northwest, but they're proposing to do a study for the entire area. Okay. And sorry, there was a second question.
No, that was my question. Thank you.
Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillors Thorpe, Pratt, Bestwick, Yocum, Brennan, and Hong opposed. Thank you. Motion
Move
fails.
number 2.
You have to move number 2 then? Is that?
Move number 2.
Move number 2. And second number 2? Okay. Any speakers to number 2? Councillor Kemp.
Well, the reason for not voting this way and leaving it is that this is an important area now that we have that new park boundary. We have new DCC charges that will be changed because of this purchasing of this land. And I was hoping that that would help speed up some of this process. So that's one of the reasons I've supported going forward with these studies. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further speakers, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Next item, number I, proposed road closure, Tronquil Road adjacent to 5302 Dewar Road. Staff recommendation on page 143 that council authorize the disposition and sale of Tronquil Road adjacent to 5302 Dewar Road to 0711789 BC Limited for the sum of $109,800. 2, direct the mayor and the corporate officer to execute the conditional road closure purchase and sale agreement. And 3, direct staff to proceed with public notice for the closure of Tronquil Road adjacent to 5302 Dewar Road. Do I have a mover? Councillor Pratt. Seconder. Councillor Bestwick. No speakers. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now we require bylaw motion that road closure and dedication removal for Tronquil Road adjacent to 5302 Dewar Road, bylaw 2015, number 7207, to close Tronquil Road adjacent to 5302 Dewar Road, pass first reading.
So moved.
So moved. Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Seeing no speakers, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Move second reading.
Second? Seconded. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Structural order number.
Just procedurally, did we do 1, 2, and 3 on page 143?
We did. Sarah Adam.
All 3 were considered, yes.
Yeah. At the same time?
Yes, Councillor Bestwick. Yeah.
Thank you.
They were done together. Yeah, sorry. Structural upgrade order 1377 Townsite Road. That the staff recommendation on page 149 that council pursuant to section 72 and 73 of the community charter resolves that the construction was completed without first submitting a building permit application, namely the garage and deck addition. I'm not going to read them in their entirety. Number 2, the owner is hereby ordered to remediate the stair and deck guardrails within 30 days, and that council advised the owner that the owner may request that council reconsider this order by providing written notice within 14 days. Do we have a mover for the motions?
So, Your Worship, do you want to invite anyone who has an interest to speak, please?
That was at the beginning. I'm terribly sorry. So on the other page, it's requested the council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to the structural upgrade order for 1377 Townsite Road. Is there anyone that wants to speak to this item? Seeing none, I call the question. Pardon me, it has not been moved yet, has it? Pardon me? Okay. Can I get a mover, please?
So moved.
Seconder, Councillor Brennan, thank you. Call the question.
It's all three?
All three. Yes. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll do it right this time. K, unresolved building deficiencies. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to unresolved building deficiencies for the properties listed below. Motion, the council instruct the corporate officer to file a bylaw contravention notice respecting the properties listed below at the Land, Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under Section 57 of the Community Charter. And the first one at 435 Pine Street has been removed, 485 Pine Street. Second one is 45 Halberton Street. Anyone wishing to speak to concerning 45 Halberton Street? Seeing none. Third one is 177 Bird Sanctuary Drive. Anyone wishing to speak to 177 Bird Sanctuary Drive? Seeing none. 102 Camp Place. Anyone wishing to speak to 102 Camp Place? Seeing none. I have a mover for the motion. All three items. Councillor Pratt, seconder. Councillor Hong. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Community service. Unauthorized suite in a single-family dwelling at 762 Townsite Road. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to the unauthorized suite at 762 Townsite Road. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to 762 Townsite Road? Seeing none, can we have a mover, please?
I so move.
And the motion, the recommendation is on 154. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hong? I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Property Maintenance Bylaw 1990, number 3704. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to property maintenance for the properties listed below. The first one is 812 Short has been removed, has it not? Yes, thank you. The last remaining one is 435 Prideaux Street. Unlicensed Mercedes, garbage, discarded furniture, and miscellaneous debris. Does anyone wish to speak to 435 Prideaux Street? Seeing none, do we have a move for the motion? Do we have a mover, please?
So moved.
So moved. It's seconded by Councillor Pratt. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Bylaws, number 10, no bylaws. Seeing none. Correspondence at 5 to 9. This is pretty good. We've made good time here. First one.
Motion to receive the correspondence.
Motion to receive correspondence. I think we'll do them seriatim. First one being number A.
So moved.
So moved. Seconded. Seeing Councillor Brennan. Did you wish to speak on A?
No, well, yes, I did. That's right. I want, well, not just on receiving it, no. Just on any action taken, I would like a question on, so I'll ask it after.
So then council to receive.
Yeah.
Okay. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Items arising from that?
Yeah. If we, the fund, the Building Canada Fund that the airport expansion project is requesting money or our support for, does that fund conflict at all with any other project that we have have already designated as a priority.
Your Worship, I can respond to that. They've applied under the Small Communities Fund, which is the same program that we applied for the Chase River Sewer that was recently approved by Council. So we, the city, have applied for a grant under that fund as well. Both applications are already in place. They were due by February 18th.
Add it to the flow chart.
Okay, I just wonder whether we would be loading up the other side in a contest for being approved. Is it limited funds? If they get the airport money, is the likelihood of us receiving money for our sewer project, is that diminished? What do we know?
The one thing I can say, Your Worship, is that the funds are limited. I don't remember exactly how much that they are, but the funds are limited. These programs are typically oversubscribed, which means they get more applications than they have dollars for any of the programs. So there will be some prioritization going on, and I'm not certain what criteria the province is going to use to choose an airport project over a sewer project, for example.
Do we have, can you tell me anything about the level of urgency for the sewer project?
No, I'm sorry. It would be difficult for me to speak to that. Tom Hickey might be able to. I'm stalling because he's in the back room listening to this, and maybe he'll come out and help us. But we wouldn't have chosen it if it wasn't a project that we thought was urgently needed and needed some additional funding for.
Thank you.
Is it my understanding, that it's been, that this has also been taken forward to the regional district, and the regional district has supported it under that funding?
My understanding is that the regional district supported it with a letter of support, and in fact, it's actually can be considered part of the electoral area A, because that's where the area is, so it's part of the regional district.
Thank you.
So could I ask the councillors that sit on the regional district, was our particular interest in the sewer for Chase River brought up in that discussion at all? Okay, thank you.
I think they were applied under two different sections on there, isn't it? Didn't we apply under this one for the?
No.
Well, we've got the national and regional projects, which has $9 billion over 10 years. That's where our IFSL affairs. The only thing that we've asked for under this fund, the Small Communities Fund, is the Chase River Sewer.
Sewer connection.
Make sense?
So do we have Mr. Hickey here now?
Mr. Hickey, I'd like to add something.
Mayor McKay, in answer to Councillor Brennan's question, what is the kind of urgency for the Chase River project? We did some studies there over the last year, and we do have capacity issues there, so we need to do some work there in the short term to increase the capacity.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's that one. Move to, we got a mover to receive.
I would move that we receive the letter from Mr. Glenn Davidson.
We did that already, Mr.
We already
Jackson?
did that.
No, we did one.
I thought we did them when I did that.
You've only received the first one, Your Worship.
Okay, very good. So, second one, letter dated 2015, February 25th, from Mr. Glenn Davidson, Controller of Water Rights, regarding the Middle Chase River Dam and Lower Chase River Dam potential safety hazards. We have one delegation, Mr. Jeff Solomon. Please come forward, Mr. Solomon.
Thank you for having me this evening. I appreciate that. And I'm here as a representative for the Collery Dam Park Preservation Society. A number of members of the board are here with me tonight. Roblin, Geraldine, and Leon. And Leon and Geraldine and myself we're also members of the technical committee. So we'll carry on here. Oops, excuse me. No? Sorry, technical difficulties. Thank you. Okay, so the motion of February 2nd, 2015. This is not a motion to do nothing. The motion clearly explains the steps that we felt were necessary. The motion includes the stakeholders. Okay.
The good, the bad,
The plan was fairly clear. Including the stakeholders in this process has a lot more ability to be successful. Unfortunately, the steps have not been taken. The staff have not followed the direction by council. None of these steps have been taken, other than sending a letter to the dam safety section. CDPPS has been readily available and willing to begin this process. As you know, we have sent you a letter, and you've received a letter, that there has been, on numerous occasions, we've stated to the City Council that we have been readily available, with no response. Communication from DSS. I'm going to give you some history because some of you are not totally aware. October 29, the city tells DSS that the dams are to be removed. DSS receives that information, and 3 months later, they send a letter to City Council meeting just as we are preparing to present an option. And at that meeting, DSS says, these dams are definitely the worst in the province. They're level 1 alert. They're the highest level of extreme risk. It took 3 months for that letter to arrive, just as we were presenting. Dr. Lauren Gale was presenting an option, and he was stating something relatively simple. If you're concerned about the middle dam blowing and knocking the lower one down, then why don't you support the middle dam and put some rocks in there so it doesn't fall down, and then everybody might die. That was said to be not adequate at that time. May 13, 2013, a DSS letter arrives just hours before the council meeting. Just hours that everybody got this letter as we were about to present. And look at a potential sequential replacement of the dams. If you're going to replace them, why destroy the park and cost millions and millions of dollars more just to do it all at one time? That was a plan. The DSS letter said, no, that can't be. The dams cannot be left for any period of time. Well, that was after Councillor Kipp and Lauren Gale had actually talked to the dam safety section previous to that and said, yes, they could actually be left as is for the duration, over the summer and over the next winter. Well, there must have been a bit of a kerfluffle about that because the fellow from the dam safety branch sent a letter that was printed in the Nanaimo Daily News 3 days later. But then he said, the only acceptable mitigation is now to drain the lakes. They had to be totally emptied of water. And this led to, well, we can't drain the lakes. We needed 40 pumps, gas-powered pumps, to keep that water level low, and that would be very disturbing to the park. It's also scare the birds, and it simply couldn't be done. So we had to get rid of the dams. So in June 2013, big push to get rid of the dams. First time in Canada, a preemptive court injunction was taken out against Mr. Cutts and John and Jane Doe. That's everybody in the Nanaimo. We were conveniently provided with viewing platforms that were going to be so we could watch the destruction of the park and the dams. Thank you very much, Nanaimo, very much appreciated. July 8th, 2013. SUNAMO intervenes and begins a consultation, and a consultation period begins. They said, listen, you're blowing up the dams. There's 100 years of sludge in those dams. Blow them up, and where's it all going? Not only destroying the park, but ruining the Chase River at the same time. So liability, it's come up many times. Many on the City Council previous, when it was brought up in 2000 and at the very beginning in October, years ago were cited about possible liability. July 2013, letter from DSS again, citing significant liability. Our former city manager cites increased risk of liability to the city. SUNEMO now withdraws from the process, citing statements from the city of personal liability. I'm going to read you what Chief Doug White, former Chief Doug White, had said on July 17, 2013. Early this week, SUNEMO received disturbing reports from city staff. We're putting forward through phone calls and emails that anyone who participates in the 30-day process, including City Council, SUNEMO, as well as the facilitator, may have significant liability by virtue of participating. These actions raise serious red flags about whether the city staff is seriously committed to exhausting possible options and considerations as directed by the council resolution. So now, SUNEMO legal advice received yesterday has made it clear the comments of city staff regarding liability are unfounded. Former Chief Doug White is a lawyer. He sought further lawyer opinion from somebody in Vancouver and got this advice. You are not legally liable. You're doing your due diligence. Risk classification of the Colliery Dams. Risks in May 26, 2014, risks associated with the dams indicate they are significantly lower than previously believed. They weren't going to blow up in an earthquake and kill everybody. They weren't going to fall down. And the problem of a risk of a flood is so incredibly small that really it is not the most major concern we have. The dams have not changed. They're in the same condition since remediation done in 1980. There's not a lot of moving parts on these structures. They were built on bedrock, for God's sakes. DSS, January 30th, 2015, a couple of days before we present to council. There's a disturbing pattern here, I'm afraid, and it's not something that you can simply just ignore. Letter arises, city recommends the auxiliary spillway now. The dams now, they say, are at a lower classification, but serious deficiencies that require immediate attention. Somehow, whoops, can you go back one? Sorry. I'm sorry. Somehow they weren't, although they sat at the meetings all this time, they had access to all this information, they didn't seem to read that the risks associated with dams indicate they're significantly lower than previously believed. Suddenly now they have to, sorry, February 25th, 2015, that's the letter you have in front of you. Letter arrives, may order drainage of the reservoir, may suspend or cancel water the license. Really? Really? Is that really necessary given what we've got? The dam safety guidelines, revised in 2013, excuse me. This is what it means when we did a risk assessment. This is what we did for our dams. And this is why we did it. Society does not have infinite resources to spend on managing risks, and often the resource spent inefficiently in one area is the same resource that is missing in another area where investment could be more beneficial. Spending $5 million, spending $10 million for some infinitesimally small risk, could you be doing something different with that money? We're not saying you don't do anything, but you make sure you have limited resources. We've heard it before. You are responsible for dealing with our money and dealing with making our citizens safe, but you have to prioritize. Questions for DSS. Does DSS act in the same manner with every community? Do they do this with every community? I think that's a valid question. They should be asked that. And does DSS have an obligation to verify information that appears to be incorrect? Really, when a whole community says, when you have a rock-filled dam with a huge concrete wall embedded in bedrock that's supposed to fall down in 3 minutes, don't you think you should be asking questions about that, whether or not that's possible? Really? And now they're saying, gosh, we have a huge, huge problem. 25 years, 25-year time frame, supposed to overflow and possibly lose our dams. 25 years. The dam has been there for over a century. and we have no record of it ever overtopping. And that's in their previous reports. Golder, 2003. They said exactly that, and I can show you the document. So excuse me, those things need to be asked before you go ahead and before you commit our dollars to something. Please look into this. Thank you. And I think that really what we want to do, I'm just going to be 1 second here. Whoops. Whatever. What I want to do is go back to the motion that you guys put forward, the motion that was passed, and it was an engagement with the stakeholders. Do you really want to go back to where we were before, that we have this huge conflict in our community of non-acceptance of the direction that you're taking? You took a valid step there. We have time. We have preached taking your time, not being forced into a decision against your will. You should not be held ransom, neither should the community be held ransom over the colliery dams. We need to make a good decision, and you did that just 1 month ago, and that got sidestepped. And we are not very pleased, and we think that you should take control and make the motion and the direction of the motion happen. And that's what we're asking for here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for giving me the extra bit of time. Is there any questions at all?
Thank you. Any questions for the delegation? Councillor Yocum.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Solomon, for the presentation and the society. The motion was actually 1 month ago this evening, and I made the motion, yes, but it's council's motion, and the vote was 7-1. So I'm really pleased that council took full-heartedly into that motion almost unanimously. What I would like to ask is, since February 2nd, more on Part B, but be the motion, has the society been working along with the city from the Golder Report, et cetera? Because that was the intent of the motion, was to ensure that all collective parties are working together. You know, it's easy to say, but shoulder to shoulder, to come out, work together, and have a resolve and work together as it hasn't up to this far, in my lens. I'm sure people would like to argue that, but in my lens, it doesn't appear that way. So I would like to, if it hasn't, I'd like to ensure that the parties are working together, as the motion states, and hopefully this motion is being taken very serious, because we did pass it 7-1. I'm sure I have some more questions in a bit after other members of council. So the question is, have you worked with the staff, or has staff engaged with you guys, or reached out and said, let's work on this together?
As we said, we have been readily available to work with the staff. That was the 3 letters of correspondence with the city in terms of getting going on this. We have had 1 month to actually put that motion into play, and it has not occurred. Everything, what you got there the other day from the dam safety section is in response to having done nothing in terms of regards to the motion. That's what we were there for. This could have been done, and that's what we intended to do. We wish to get this resolved, and we wish to have a conclusion that people can live with, and that people can see that makes sense. And yes, we still remain available for that, but it has not occurred, not in the least.
So to conclude, may I just wrap it up? Yep. Thank you. What I would expect from the motion is, we don't have quite a month, but everyone's seen the letter from I'm assuming everyone's seen the letter from the province, and until March 27th, everyone get together and work, like you just suggested, a solution that everyone can live with. So I look forward to you guys working together, staff and your society. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon, for your work. Question, to your knowledge, has Golder and Associates been on site to recalculate or calculate spillway capacity?
No, they have not been on site as far as we know at all. The only information that we have regarding the spillway capacity, which we have asked for numerous times, is that they looked at the previous information that was on file. And they said, well, okay, it's now a little bit more than double what they had before, but they have not actually, as far as I know, done any specific measurement to recalculate. We are I want you to understand that we don't think that the spillway capacity, it could well be that it is under capacity. However, it has also proven absolutely fine for over 100 years and has never reached anywhere close to overtopping. And so, but the actual calculation has not been done, and we have asked for that many, many times.
Thank you. And just to follow up, do you have reason to believe that the spillway calculation information that's being utilized to come up with the spillway numbers is accurate or inaccurate?
We cannot presume that it's accurate whatsoever because every study you look at is different, and they've taken it, most of the work that was done over the last year was with regards to it being at 25 cubic meters per second. That's when you heard, geez, it's 7 times under capacity for what it should be. Well, now it's, but if you look at another study, it's 35, and now it's 45, and then it's 55 now. But there's nothing stated how they came to that calculation, and it's just been guesswork as far as I'm concerned. We do believe that it's higher than that.
Can I make a comment as a technical committee member? The Golder report of June 17, 2014, in their own words, site-specific surveys were not completed at the dam sites by Golder. Information that was previous was used to do calculations. But I want to remind you that we've been asking for calculations. What calculations did Golder use? In this document, it says site-specific surveys were not completed at the dam sites by Golder. So for $2.5 million, we still want that question answered, because that could be the key to knowing exactly, once and for all, what is the capacity to take the flow in those spillways. They didn't do it.
Thank you.
Thanks, thank you for confirming that.
Any other, Councillor Kep?
Thank you. Back to the spillway calculations. There's a number of ways to calculate the spillway. One of the concerns from Colliery Dam Preservation Society is that they're calculating from the front of the dam face. What I'll say is west of the bridge, and I'll say the downstream is east of the bridge, just for easy talk now. So the concern that Colliery Dam has had is that the calculation of 55 cubic meters per second under the one model that was done by Clone Klippenberg a long time ago, if you took that at the bridge that crosses the dam, on the downstream side where the actually drops and falls away, I've understood, and from the measurements, and I've actually gone out and physically measured it myself, been involved in physical measurement, that it can increase the capacity measuring from that point and the slope downtrend up to 140 cubic meters per second.
In our rough calculations, it could well be that, and really that's the amount that we are looking for, or what this plan is to increase the spillway capacity. I think before there is a commitment to do something, which is an incredible amount of cost. We are talking about something that has never been of any specific use at all, that we make sure that we take the time. When I brought this out many times, it's this sense of urgency, this sense of emergency that does not exist with the colliery dams. So we want to take a step back from that to make sure that we do this right. Remember, Jump Creek almost failed in 1988. It took 10 years. There were so many problems, and it took many, many $1 million. Dam Safety Section accepted that this process would take a long time to get settled, and it did. And now there's more problems because it wasn't built that well. But our dams have never caused any problem, and we do not need to rush into a fix, but we don't know if a fix is necessary. That's the bottom line here.
Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. With the date of March 27th from the DSS, I'd like to suggest or hope from here on in any conversations, shared work, etc., between our staff and the DSS would be a tripartite arrangement where the Colliery Dam Park Preservation Society, the city staff, work together shoulder to shoulder and interact with the same messaging and be on the same page when communicating with the province, where I would not like to, you guys not to be included. So I'm suggesting when we meet with at the staff level and the technical level, et cetera, the three parties are there, and which includes you guys and other key stakeholders, but predominantly I'm concerned you need your guys' input in those conversations. I'd be really more comfortable knowing that all three parties are there, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't see any other questions. I do have a question though. So if we're at right now at 55 cubic meters per second, do you disagree with the requirement to be to prepare for the 145, 155, which is the calculation on the table?
If you bypass the risk assessment totally, remember, this was done initially because it's not even being regarded right now, the risk assessment, and yet we spent a lot of money to have one of the prime experts in the United States, a person who's presented to the Congress with regards to risk assessments over, huge nuclear plants and that, billion-dollar projects. Well, he came to Nanaimo for our colliery dams because they were deemed the worst dams in BC. I don't know what we spent for this, but it's incredible that we had this man come. And that his information is, as far as I'm concerned, being totally disregarded. If you want to go in terms of the other model and you look at the classification, yes, that's exactly right. You have to have it at 145 cubic meters per second. That's correct. But one of the reasons why we did the risk assessment was to put this in a perspective, and that's why we talk about we do not have infinite resources. If you apply this kind of request for everything and all your other dams, then you are going to be spending $1 zillion, and that's what this is for.
Okay, I couldn't agree with you more that if you apply certain standards across the 9 that we have, that we have to make this decision, we be very, very careful with this decision. So my question again is, are we concerned right now to review, and you want to see the calculations on how they came to the current capacity, spillway capacity?
Okay, in this report,
is that the main consideration?
Sorry, Your Worship, in this report, it's the methodology of how they arrived at the spillway. And if you read this report, there's only 3 pages. If you read this report, they used previous information from water management consultants, from A&E Engineering. And if you read this, it's data, it's information accumulated, and it arrives, and I'm going to quote a comment. Sorry. Evaluating breach parameters, okay, because there's a discussion where it actually breaches and the flow changes. And rehabilitation options is an ongoing process. It's still being refined. In here, they're still saying it's still being refined. Well, this refining is the issue that we're standing here saying it's not refined enough. You can take different information from different people and put it on a piece of paper and say, this is what we think it is. But we ask for this information to be actually surveyed and calculated using the same formulas that they quote, Manning ends and discharges and all those things. But this is like gathering information and saying, we support this information. But we keep asking numerous times for those calculations. Show us those calculations. This is methodology to arrive at what they say is only at 1.35. Now we get to 55. Maybe if we do a cross-sectional, maybe we do an actual physical modeling of that with dimensions, maybe we get larger. But in all the reports I've read, there is no calculations of showing the exact spillways being measured, depths, widths, all those things in any report. So they refer to different things, different languages.
And the other thing too is that if there does have to be work done, then let's do that. But let's make sure that it is the most, as we've said many times before, the most cost-effective and least intrusive measure. And we don't believe that a 30-meter wide swath at 5-meter deep ditch is there. We don't believe that. Nor do we believe that that's necessary. It seems ludicrous to consider that. So I think there could be some other options.
So if I can follow up, the next one would be, so dimension calculation is one, capacity calculation is one. Do we have any dispute with requirement? It's 145, 150, whatever that number happens to be, based on the table. So if we went away for a week and they came back and said, okay, here's how we came to it, we all sat down in a room and said, okay, we agree with these calculations, no, we don't agree with those, okay, let's rejig them, and we come out with a number at the end of, 2 or 3 days of deliberation that we're at 59 cubic meters per second capacity.
If this city council feels very strongly that this is a priority to make sure that this dam will not have 1 inch of water going over the top of it in a storm that could happen in 34,000 years, and that's a priority for the city council, yes, then that's what you're going to want to do. But I guess that's something that requires a wee bit of discussion.
So you're not so if I'm getting this correct, we want to go over the calculations to determine capacity.
I think you always start from the very beginning. This should have been on record and really locked down from day one. How can you actually go ahead and have plans for this emergency spillway when you don't even know what the capacity of the existing spillway is? I think you really do start with that. Square one.
So let's say we come up with a number. Is anybody questioning the table on the back of the letter that talks about the requirement and the volume that has to get over that spillway?
According to
145, 160.
According to the classification, that's exactly correct. According to the classification.
It's up to council.
But that's up to council. I mean, the whole idea of the risk assessment that what was done is to include really how you prioritize spending your resources. You have limited resources.
I guess the issue is, it's like we were engaged. We were engaged to sit across the table and say, we say 1.8, you say 1.7. You tell us how you got how we got 1.8. We'll tell you how we got 1.8. You tell us how you got 1.7. And we sit back and forth and we go through this discussion with Golder because we had asked for that discussion. And then the disengagement, because it was at that point in time, we didn't walk away from the table and quit. We just saw time to step back, and we stepped back because we were getting some things answered. We were not getting things we wanted answers to, documents, reports, so we stepped back. So the engagement is to sit back with Golder and take two of the most credible people in Lauren and Cliff who were on our committee. These are Cliff is brilliant when it comes to this. He's doing a project for SNC Lavalin right now. To sit across from each other and say, you know what, we arrive at this, you arrive at that. It's like checking math in a homework book. But we had that disengagement. We need to come back to this table together and tell the Dam Safety Branch, yes, we are working on it, and we will get back to you. We're not completed.
And we've spent, or the city council, or this city has spent $2.5 million. It's not like you haven't done anything. I mean, not a lot of that money was well spent, but you have been working on this for a couple of years and spent a whole chunk of money. So.
Okay. So I've got another follow-up, and that is, in the original motion of February 2nd, it states as a statement that the dams have now been reclassified and no longer extreme consequence, and yet we have this letter from Dam Safety that says they're only going to go to the lower consequence once the remediation is done. Do you have anything to comment on that?
Yeah, that's exactly opposite from what they said previously, that the dams were reclassified. We have them even from May. I mean, why did the city put out why do we have a letter and the city put out their information thing, package saying that the dams have been reclassified because of what I said on our
risk assessment.
On the risk assessment. I mean, the whole idea is that, it's a little frustrating sometimes because on two occasions, we do this on a volunteer basis. I shouldn't have to remind the engineers that are involved with this that get paid a couple $100 an hour that they don't even understand the actual information that they are presenting. I've had to say to them twice, excuse me, The risk assessment that you did, status quo. When I came to the city council on a number of occasions, I said, you know what? Those dams could fall down in this huge storm. We've never had a 1,000-year storm. No one dies. No one dies. If they fell down, which I doubt they would, but if they fell down and that water went, no one dies because it's in the risk assessment. That's what we paid for. Status quo. That's as is. No difference.
And we have correspondence.
And we have the correspondence to account for that. We wanted to make sure that that information is correct. So what you're getting there, when we say inaccuracies of what you're provided, well, that's part of it. That is part of it. And that's really unfortunate that we should have to remind the dam safety section and the engineers what's actually in the studies that were presented to us.
Thank you.
A little disappointing.
You yesterday posted something on social media, I believe it was Facebook and a couple of places there, a copy of a letter to mayor and council. Did council receive this letter? Because I didn't receive it. Did you receive this letter, though, by email? It says that it was delivered by email.
I heard it was on social media. I'm not on social media.
Right.
I did send it, and I do have a copy that it was sent in my email folder.
You did not get it.
Okay, I apologize for that. I had sent it before it was posted in social media. So I intended that you get it first.
No,
so I'm sorry about that. I did look in my folder, and it is there.
As sent.
As sent to actually mayor and council and quite a few other people.
No. So, just so you know, I didn't receive it. I don't know if anybody else did.
I will resend it.
Yeah.
I apologize for that. I assumed that you would have
Thank you.
got it.
Thank you, Robin. Councillor Kipp, any other further?
No. Well, yeah, actually, yes. I guess what I hear from the Collery Dam Preservation Society is we have time to wait. We've been going at this now for a few years. It's been very clear that the seismic risk is gone by the wayside now. It was based on a lack of probability before, so now they've taken in probability into that to change the 2013 standards. I guess the problem for me all along is looking at one risk in the community and focusing on it. There's 22 risks that have been identified in Nanaimo, and all have the consequence of life or death actions because they're major disasters. We have 3 levels of disasters, and there's a local one that people can deal with every day, the fire department deals with. Level 2, we can maybe get some help, or it's more people required. Then level 3, where there's other jurisdictions come in. And we seemingly, for a few years, have focused on this one dam failure as the biggest thing to hit Nanaimo. We had 18 deaths due to heroin in Nanaimo in the last year. And we're not focusing on that as much as we're focusing on this dam. And the stats say that one person can die from this when it massive collapse. And it's still assumption of a 23,000 flood, 2/3 of it. So that assumption is what we're basing this on. We have a government agency that is basically attacking us sometimes for our belief that we can accept risk. We accept risk in this community for earthquakes, hazardous material, telecommunication failure, a whole pile of things. And we're focusing on this one dam like it's going to kill Nanaimo. And in my mind, it's just ridiculous. It's way beyond my belief that we haven't, this council haven't even had, the last 2 councils I know, haven't really even had a workshop on emergency management of our plan and what our plan exists on. And that's where I feel we're failing our community. We're really not prioritizing our disaster management.
I'd just like to comment, if we look at the 2012, this is by BMA Engineering, this is the 2012 dam inspections for the city of Nome. If you look at the inspection on Jump Creek Dam and South Fork Dam, those are our 2 major water supplies. If you read the comments in there, there's deficiencies in these two dams. Deficiencies along the lines of the information is our annual review, which should be reviewed as third-party verification, has detected numerous data entry errors with the 2012 and previous year's data. So this is our watershed. And I won't get into the detail, but there's information in here that says things like, failure of the boom and debris blockage of the dam may be dangerous to the safety of the dam. I think we need, and maybe we have, but pointing this out, South Fork and Jump Creek, if these deficiencies still exist, why are we worrying so much about the Harewood dams? That's our watershed. That's how we get water every day. So if these deficiencies are in this report from 2009 coming forward, why is the priority on this one location versus our watershed? And I just ask to staff that maybe this is looked at if it's not been looked at, because I read every report you produce and it's in there. There's a whole bunch of comments about things that need to get done. Thank you.
Thank you. No other questions? Move to receive. Seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kipp. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Does council propose any actions? Oh, Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm prepared to make a motion, and if I can get a seconder for it, I will be pleased to speak to it. And my motion reads that staff be instructed to bring to the next level, or sorry, the next meeting of council, the options which have been identified as ways to remediate the lower dam in such a way as to satisfy the requirements of the provincial government. Options presented should include approximate costs and environmental impact. I'm looking for a seconder for that.
Seconded by Councillor Pratt.
May I speak to that, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
What's it been, 2 years now? Councillor Kipp, at least 2 years? This has gone on long enough. Mr. Solomon, I appreciate your presentation and the work that your group has done. You say that there is no sense of urgency and that we should take steps back. I just feel that we continually have been taking steps back on this issue over the past 2 years instead of dealing with it. It's time for City Council to step up and instead of looking to the past, look to the future and take some action. Yes, there's other problems in our community and there's other potential areas that, that we probably should identify or deal with. But like it or not, the provincial government has identified a potential safety hazard related to the flood routing capacity at the lower dam. And yes, we can disagree with their findings. Lots of people seem to. And we can just hope for the best and hope that nothing happens. It's very easy to pound the table and say we won't spend another dime on the dams. But again, I think we're now past the point of arguing and quibbling about the facts and figures. A risk has been identified, and like it or not, we have a moral and a legal responsibility to respond. I'm not interested any longer in debating statistics and disputing numbers. I think the time for that is done. We've gotten advice from experts. We've spent lots of money. I'm not interested in spending more time and money on reports. Stakeholders have been involved for the past 2 years. There's been lots of consultation. Unfortunately, we don't always agree with the answers that we get. But now I feel, and this is my personal opinion, that we need to do our duty as councillors and address this issue. I want to see the options for remediation at our next meeting, and at that time I want to make a decision on which option is best to proceed with. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
I actually have very little to add to what Councillor Thorpe said. I agree with him. I think that the urgency is that we have a provincial government that is concerned, and they've set some standards for us to meet, and that we have a responsibility to our citizens to meet that. I have heard from lots of citizens that they want us to be done with this. They want us to resolve this issue and get on with other important issues that face the city. The motion was to bring it back to the next council meeting. Is that correct? Yeah. So perhaps in between, if the Colliery Dam Preservation Society would like to sit at a table with our staff and Golder and themselves, and they can set out their objections and see if they can convince our professional staff and the professional staff of Golder that they're correct, and then that's fine. That could be communicated to us. As they say, they're available, and one last stab is fine, but the direction to staff is to bring back options for remediation, and they can have a discussion with other parties during that time, but I want to see the options at our table.
Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. I really see this motion unnecessary. I made a motion a month ago, which has been totally disrespected. Deaf ears. Enough's enough. Mr. Sullivan outlined they're more than willing to sit down and meet and discuss a plan. Remediation may not be the best plan, considering there's still a month of conversation. The letter states a deadline of March 27th. And come up with a plan, just communicate with the province, get the parties together. So, no, I'm not a fan of making another motion. We already got a motion in place. This just hasn't come into place. So again, I'm feeling really disrespectful about that motion. I'm sure a few of you have your views and your comments, et cetera. Why? So we have a motion in place from a month ago to get this in order acting, and we have people that are willing to get together and communicate with our staff, the society, etc. So I see it unnecessary, and we should we can question the province a little bit or a lot. And why would we not put up have a conversation at the political level and the technical level at the same time, going at the same time? It makes common sense to me, and I hear some council members saying enough's enough and they're tired of the conversation. Well, you know, I'm just tired of thinking there's $6 to $10 million to throw away every time. There's a little bit of hard work to do, and let's do that hard work on behalf of the people and the money, etc., and most of all the dams. Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick. Councillor Bestwick.
Sorry, I thought there was somebody else had the floor. I wasn't sure.
Councillor Bestwick, go ahead.
Thank you. I would just like to say that I feel as though that I have been doing my duty as a councillor on this topic for as long as this topic has been on our agenda. And quite frankly, I have not wavered in any vote at any time since this was first brought to our attention. And I don't know that that can be said by all. I would like to say that that motion of February the 2nd has not been followed as per the letter of its intent. And its intent was to re-engage the CDPS with our staff, with the professionals, to review and assumedly advance to something that was the least intrusive, the least invasive, and the least expensive. The question that I have, is it reasonable to assume that if this motion that's on the floor passes, that we will receive the same solutions as to the problem, so to speak, as we already have been provided? That being, as far as I understand right now, 100 feet wide by approximately 18 feet deep. Sorry, somebody's saying it's 150 feet wide. So is that, to Mr. Swaby, is that what we're going to receive? Is that option that we've already been provided?
Your Worship, there's one of the reports outlined all of the options that Golder had reviewed as part of the technical committee, as well as the option that Mr. Seward brought forward in consultation with the Colliery Dam Preservation Society, as well as the GIS proposal, which if you went to an RFP, you could include that. So I believe there was 7 proposals that were identified as having potential if you did the RFP process. They would include, it's all about increasing the spillway capacity, and that can be achieved by having an alternate spillway, by enlarging the spillway, or by overtopping the dam and hardening it.
Thank you. And that meeting that we're referring this information to come back to is 2 weeks from tonight? In the meantime, or in the interim, if there's will there be an opportunity to engage the CDPS between now and then, or would that be something that requires a motion, or how does that come out? Is that part of the? Would that be part of the process in coming back with options, or simply the options that we've already been provided, the 7 that you just made reference to in previous reports? That's in the form of a question.
Your Worship, staff is looking for direction from council.
Okay, so the direction, right, what is the motion, please?
Actually, Councillor Thorpe, can you please repeat that? And we'll get it verbatim after.
The motion read.
Go ahead.
The motion read that staff be instructed to bring to the next meeting of council the options which have been identified as ways to remediate the lower dam in such a way as to satisfy the requirements of the provincial government. Options presented should include approximate costs and environmental impact. If I may, Mr. Mayor, I'd be quite happy to include in that motion any additional options which would fit the bill as well.
Councillor Kep.
Well, thank you. After studying the dams for a long time and understanding them when I put the emergency management plan together, I have a real problem just accepting a bunch of reports because time has gone by. 2 years we've gone by. The dam's been there 100 years. We've had tons of studies on it. I've read them inside and out. I'm not certain how many reports you've read.
I've read them all.
So the technical knowledge is there. Do you understand the sizing of the spillway capacity and how it was managed and what model it was managed under? Do you understand that?
I'm not an engineer, Councillor.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So you can say we don't understand all that technical information. But for me, to say that it's a moral issue, when I know there's bigger risk in the community, when I know there's bigger risk, it's moral to me too. When I see a legal thing, constantly the legal issue brought up for me, if I make a really stupid error, I'm responsible. Yes, I'm willing in my life to take that. But to sit here after only a couple of months, 6, 7 weeks, and into this process, and have another letter come expedited from the provincial government, and when I check over their compliance and enforcement on their website, this is not an almost order. It's just a letter from about a 5th-level bureaucrat in forest lands and natural resources that's telling me to do something in my community that I don't agree with. So I can't agree with you just to make we got to do something. We got to do a move. We got to make a decision. It doesn't suit my needs on this one to say that this is a risk. I've read the letter from Mr. Davidson and his 6 pages, and it goes over things, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. Like the presentation said, our current engineering hasn't even gone and measured the spillway that we're concerned about. You're basing everything on assumption, scientific assumption. Can't support your motion.
Councillor Pratt.
No, I'm not going to speak.
Done? Okay. No further speakers. One more time, can we have the motion read, please?
Do you want to pass to me and I can read it? Or are you okay,
What do you...
Councillor Thorpe?
So it's official? Do you want me to?
Certainly, unless we need to work it.
The motion read that staff be instructed to bring to the next meeting of council the options which have been identified as ways to remediate the lower dam in such a way as to satisfy the requirements of the provincial government. Options presented should include approximate costs and environmental impact.
Thank you. Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. This proposed resolution is totally out of order and inconsistent with the existing resolution from February 2nd. I don't want to be, I'm being repetitive, but it's quite obvious. Thank you.
Yep. Any further speakers? Call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is defeated. So, do we have, I don't need to ask the question, but do we have alternate direction to staff?
There's a motion. Is there not a motion that is on the floor that Councillor Yocum made, and there was a process in that at the meeting before?
Yeah, deal with that.
Councillor Pratt.
I guess I would just like to say that staff has dealt with that by taking that motion to the Dam Safety Board, and the Dam Safety Board has been very specific in their response to that. So it isn't that nothing has been done. That was a first step to see what the reaction of the Dam Safety Board would be. And they've been very clear. And as a city councillor, I take that seriously. And I'm sorry that it doesn't meet the approval of certain people in the community or people that care very much about this issue. I'm not for 1 minute minimizing that, but I'm not minimizing some of the indications we've had around legal counsel advising us already, and what the steps are moving forward in terms of what is required of us. I'm not minimizing that either, and so I feel that we're being really irresponsible here in terms of putting the community at risk.
Thank you. Okay, so no further business.
Mr. Mayor, just quickly.
Yes, Mr. Yocum.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to disagree with Councillor Pratt. For the fact is, following the steps in the motion, it didn't. There was nowhere in lieu of. Do I read anywhere saying our staff get hold of the DSS before the conversations with the key stakeholders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's pretty crystal clear of all the parties and all groups willing to work together. I'm assuming our city are willing to work together, because we just heard Mr. Sullivan say their group want to go to the table and get together to discuss the concerns in the letter and come up with an educated answer. I heard Mr. Cake talk about some technical, I don't know anything about the technical issues, but you guys that know this stuff, get on the table and talk her out like everyone should and will do. Thank you. So there is direction there. I don't know why it's being ignored. Again, thank you.
Councillor Pratt.
We had a deadline of February 27th to get back to the Dam Safety Board, and that is the reason that our staff...
March 27th.
No, this new deadline is March 27th. The other deadline was February 27th. And so the staff was complying with that deadline. And so regardless of what anyone wants to think in terms of whether or not that was a good move on the part of our staff or not, that was something that was required. And staff did send that letter out to the council and ask for guidance regarding that letter to Dam Safety Board, and no one on this council disagreed with that letter.
Actually, point of order, I could read what I sent to the...
Okay, Mr. Kipp disagreed with the letter then. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that clarification, but no one else on this council did.
Thank you.
Actually sent it out to council after too.
I just want to throw my 2 cents worth in. The vote's been taken. There's been a lot of talk about how these dams will never overtop. I don't think anybody figured that the Saddle Dome would be under 20 feet of water either. In Calgary, nobody believed that that stadium, after $1 billion worth of damage to it, excuse me, the next thing is that they will never overtop, that this will never happen. Okay, so I'm going to take you a few miles to the north, to Comox. I had the vice president of Timber West in my office recently, and he talked about a creek that's up there that has a normal winter flow of 6 cubic meters per second. And on December 8th and 9th was running at over 600 cubic meters per second is the estimate. 600. So for folks to suggest that this will never happen, it's never happened in 100 years, there's been all kinds of events that have taken place that have never happened in 100 years, never happened in 500 years. The fact is that at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Conference just a few months ago, there was a professor of environmental studies and climatic studies from the University of Waterloo said that the most important thing for communities in Canada is to start adapting themselves for climate change. For us to suggest that it will never happen is just absolutely sticking our heads in the sand. Then we talk, you know, I was at dinner not long ago at a social function, and a very well-respected lawyer in our community, who's also an MLA, said to me, "You better be careful. You better be careful, because once they place an order on you, that you can be held criminally negligent." This didn't come from staff. It didn't come from the Dam Safety Branch. It came from a well-respected member of our Legislative Assembly. It's exactly right. It's exactly right. Am I concerned? The reason I voted against this, voted in favor of the motion that Councillor Thorpe put forward, is because if they start doing, we don't know what they're going to do, but if they do, I want my vote to be on the other side of that, because I certainly don't want to put my personal assets on the line because we're going to quibble about a few cubic meters here, cubic meters there. We've been ordered to do something here. We're just going to have to see how it plays out. Thank you. Councillor Holland.
Thank you. I didn't really want to chime in this because I was enjoying this reading from the Dam Safety Branch, but I just wanted to read this out to you guys in one of their mandates in their introduction. It says, all dam owners in British Columbia are legally responsible for the operation, inspection, and maintenance of their dams to minimize risk to the public, the environment, and the economy, to ensure that the dam owners are aware of and in compliance with the regulation. Dam safety officers conduct audits of dam owner safety programs, provide education and awareness to dam owners to maintain information on each of the dams in the provincial dam registry. So it doesn't seem like anywhere I've read through the Dam Safety Branch that they are interested in suing people, holding liability. I just think that they want us to be doing our job and maintaining and looking after the dam, where minimize the risk. I think everything has risk, and I think we do a pretty good job in maintaining a minimized risk to it. Thank you.
Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. I guess that gets to my point on the Saddle Dome in Calgary. They opened the flood channel late, and that's what happened to downtown Calgary. They had flood channels, and as the water come down the river, they made a mistake and didn't open up the flood channel quick enough, and it overtopped, and yeah, there's 14 feet of water in there. Getting to my point of all hazard risk, that's every hazard that affects the community, understanding them, facing and minimizing the risk, mitigating the concerns, planning for response and recovery from 22 disasters, especially based on the new paradigm of what our Earth is doing to us. So to say we have to concern ourselves with this little dam and we're worried about global warming while we're ignoring pipes, our sewer pipes, our power plants, any of our hazardous material storage areas, if you're looking at liability, a good lawyer would say, wow, you spent all your time on that little dam and those ponds and you forgot about all this other stuff. So really question yourself when you're concerned about liability when a government order comes through. They told Mount Poly to fix their dam too. No, and they're not even supposed to look at recreational dams, did they?
Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, it failed because the government agency didn't know what they were doing. Our people do know what they're doing on this dam.
Councillor Brennan.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say that the Dam Safety Branch isn't suing us. So they're not. They would be fining us. It's a totally different concept than suing us. They have the authority to levy a fine. And so that's what they would do, is levy fines. If there was a breach, then it would be citizens and businesses who would be in a position then to sue us. And I suppose if there was an investigation and it showed that the council had knowledge of this and, had ignored the information and the advice, then I imagine there could be some sort of criminal investigations. But at this point, the Dam Safety Branch is suggesting that that they can fine us. So with regard to whether the Dam Safety Branch goes out suing people or cities or municipalities, they fine them.
Thank you. Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. Just for clarity, again, I'm sounding really repetitive. Just so Mr. Mayor, I heard your words, I heard everyone's words. I'm equally just as concerned about safety, public's interest, et cetera, et cetera. But we do have a motion, so from here on in, till March 27th, is our staff going to be working with, as the motion line item B says, with the society, et cetera? Because I've said it, I think, about 4 times now, but I've yet had actually a clear answer. So I'd be more comfortable knowing tonight, is the motion going to be acted on, or is it just going to be on deaf ears?
We already have a motion that's been approved 7-1.
So it will be acted on then, and working with all the key stakeholders. Any communications with DSS will be with all parties, as it states, I think, in line B. That's just so there is movement happening. The parties are willing to come together, and I want to ensure that's happening. So we are being proactive.
Okay, so if we're going down that road, we do have to understand that often on the other side is Dam Safety Branch. So we can take as much time as we want and carry on with this thing, but they may do what they have to do as well.
Okay. Oh no, I wasn't implying take eons. I was implying everyone I think in the room is well over a March 27th date, right, and get the parties together, which we should have earlier, but nevertheless, today's today. We go onward and forward as a collective, and all the parties at the table doing what they have to do at the technical level. I want to be reassured that's going to be happening. So I'm not suggesting just ignore it or no conversations, but I just want the appropriate people discussing and come with a resolution. At the same time, a few of us may have to talk to Minister Thompson at the same time, but that's how would be progressive, and I see hopefully this how this goes forward. Thank you.
So just before you go, so it sounds to me as though you're looking for a session of the technical committee.
That's what the intent of, I should have been clear earlier, I guess, and earlier in the motion, sorry, a month ago, but nevertheless, that was hopefully the intent. That is the intent, and to answer your question, yes. And I've heard one party say they're willing to go to the table. I'm assuming ours would, and I hope they would, and come up with some resolve. Remediation, there might be spillway conversations. I'm first, I don't know enough about the technical points, but I think there's enough wisdom amongst both tables to come up with a resolution. So that's what I'm hoping, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was the intent.
Councillor Brennan.
I just want to make sure that this motion isn't being construed as an instruction to our staff that they can only speak to the dam safety section through the committee, because I cannot see us suggesting to our staff that they can't communicate with a level of government that sets the regulations on our dams.
Okay. Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. it would be fully intended for us to be together as one in a collaborative approach of our staff and the people in the technical wisdom of the society and the wisdom of our staff to speak collectively and together in unity with the DSS. That is in my intent, and that's how one should role model, that's how one should act, and that's how one should govern, and together in partnership and as a collaborative approach. So I totally do not agree with Councillor Brennan. My intent is our staff and the society to work together and speak to DSS together. We're only stronger as one. Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I can't speak for Councillor Yoakum, but clearly he's wishing for 5B in the original motion of February 2nd to be acted upon.
Yeah.
Recognizing that it's March 2nd and that there's a motion on the floor now to bring back this alternatives available to us in 2 weeks on March 16th. In the meantime, let's not forget about the February 2nd motion that was 5-part, of which there's a part, or parts in plural, that haven't been observed. And I think that that's what Councillor Yoakum is saying. So I agree with that. So if there is some pushback from DSS, if there's some new information, if there's a way to come to some collaborative approach that may give us more time or it may not, but there's nothing ventured, nothing gained. So if we don't take seriously the motion of February 2nd, and I think that's part of what's happened here, is that the motion hasn't been addressed. And it was a directive. Councils wasn't done to the satisfaction and or the intent of the 5-part motion. So that, to me, is something that requires being tended to.
Thank you. No further speakers? No motion? Thank you. Next item, question period.
Fred Taylor, 204 Emery Way. We've seen some history on the Colliery Dams tonight. I would like to ask a question. Who generated the report and paid for the report that's in hands of the government?
We did.
Thank you. City of Nanaimo did. You've created all kinds of trouble and costs. Number 2, is there a copy of the direction to the consultant available to the public for writing that report?
Direction to the consultant?
Yes. I wasn't born yesterday, Mayor McKay. I've seen lots of reports written that didn't give the council the day direction, and rewritten. You can't get your hands on the ones that were written to start with. We want reports that say what we want. Get it? So I'm asking for a copy of the direction to the consultant. It's open council, isn't it here? Where's the copy of the direction to the consultant what to write? Did you tell them we want to destroy the dams?
Are you suggesting that there was a predetermined, it was predetermined what he was supposed to write?
Let me read the direction, please. We've constructed a large chlorinated water reservoir beside these things. What report has gone to, I suppose, VHA as to the construction, maintenance of this chlorinated water and its disposal if there's an emergency to pollute these lakes if there exist? Is there something in the direction of a report about the creation of this, because you had to drain it not too long ago because cracks in the floor, and you're dumping all kinds of stuff into the little creek that goes into the dam to get rid of the chlorine.
So I don't think anybody on council can answer that question for you. So, Mr. Swaby, can you, just a moment, Mr. Taylor.
It's our reservoir.
No,
We must
Mr.
have sent
Taylor, you asked a
report about
question.
it.
I'm trying to answer your question. You asked, is there a report to VHA that says how we're going to deal with chlorinated water should we have to dump that reservoir? So I'm telling you, I don't believe anyone in council can answer your question. So I was about to ask our city manager, if he doesn't know the answer to that question, can we provide it to Mr. Taylor?
We will, Your Worship.
Thank you.
And the last question is, it's all right to show us a letter from the government demands. I think I have a right as a member of the public to see Mr. Swaby's letter to the ministry to start with. I want to see what it says. Maybe it says we want the dams removed.
Thank you.
Letter available to the public? Your letter? You know my email address, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
you.
My question is trying to address or perhaps clarify.
Get your name and address for the file, please.
I can't hear.
Name and address for the file, please.
My mistake, sorry. Dara Wurlage, 495 Hillcrest Avenue in Nanaimo.
Thank you, Ms. Woolers.
Okay, my question is trying to address and perhaps bring a little bit of clarification into the concerns that Your Worship, Mayor McKay was addressing or expounding on in regards to we don't know what will happen in the future with how much water could come down our various rivers and streams. We simply aren't, we don't know. So there's some concern there. Is council aware that climatologists, climate specialists in Victoria have been doing extensive climate studies of our area and have come out with various climate models? And those climate models all indicate that we are heading into a drier climate, not a wetter one. This is very clear. There's been a lot of studies on the fact that cedar trees are going to diminish. The pine trees will take over. I would also bring to everyone's attention the fact that we've had a very, very mild, unusually mild winter this year. We have virtually no snow cover. I would strongly suggest that we will be in a drought situation this summer. So my question, I would like you to all think about this. Where are we going? The answer that I have been given is that we're going from a modified Mediterranean climate, which we are presently in, to a true Mediterranean climate, similar to Greece and southern Spain, California. This is where the climatologists all their climate models are indicating we're going drier and quickly, not slower. So to bring this into the situation with colliery dams, that's my question. Can you answer it? Have you factored that in to the concerns regarding the potential public safety risks with the colliery dam situation? Climate change.
Okay, I don't think that there's anybody on council that has that information.
All right, okay, it is available. There's been extensive studies. Some of them were posted with the museum in Victoria. Perhaps that could be a part of the package that is looked into when you continue with the discussions with the Colliery Dam Park Preservation Society and other interested stakeholders. The original motion by Councillor Yocum did specify members of the public, so members of the public could come forward with climate change data that perhaps could clarify where our climate is heading. In order for water to come down the Chase River to overtop the colliery dams, we have to have that water coming from somewhere. It's my understanding that the watershed at the head of Chase River has no capacity to suddenly deluge a huge amount of water. And the less snowpack, the less that capacity. So I really want to bring this forth. I really want to emphasize climate change does not just mean more water. It also means less water. And it's my understanding from my personal research that our area is heading seriously into less water. So my question again is, were you aware of this? You had indicated, you answered that no, you weren't. So then I'm making a suggestion that kind of tied into that perhaps this information might be useful in understanding or helping to make decisions for everyone's best interest on this topic.
Okay, so Councillor Kipp has a question for you, but I wanted to ask you before. So how would that assist us in
risk assessment for one, more realistic risk assessment. If there is little chance of a huge flood.
No, I don't think you're getting me.
Okay.
How does that assist us telling the dam safety section that we need to disregard their guidelines under the Canadian Dam Owners Association guidelines?
I understand.
How does that help us?
I understand what you're saying. It's my understanding the Dam Safety Bureau works within the dam safety guidelines, as they have no authority outside the dam safety guidelines. It's also my understanding, as Councillor Hong interpreted the dam safety guidelines, that they are interested in reasonably anticipated disasters, of which the colliery dams clearly do not fall within the dam safety guidelines under that definition. So perhaps a Councillor Kipp's assessment that it is not as critical as has been suggested may be accurate. That would be the best I could answer you on that one.
Councillor Kipp.
Well, actually, thank you, Dora. Back in 2001, putting together the city's emergency management plan took into account the knowledge and information then on atmospheric changes.
Yes.
Putting in the plan drought, for example, in 2001, people in town thought, what? You're putting drought in an Amos plan?
Yes.
But the 2003 drought across BC caused immense fires.
Yes.
And it was a drought situation. Atmospheric problems we've talked about, hail, rain, snow, and wind effects.
Yes.
And we built those into our plan. Interestingly enough, of our 22 disasters, there's 6 primary concerns based on, and this was done a few years ago now. And the probability is fire-urban interface, and that's a high. Hazardous material transportation incidents, medium. Seismic events, medium. Pandemic, medium. Major storms, high, and there's no threat of tsunami really in the Nanaimo. And then it goes on to a lot of other things like flooding, like landslides and debris flows, and that are basically, and volcanic ash is another one that's in our plan. So we took into consideration, but the plan hasn't been updated, nor that risk assessment hasn't been updated for a few years. So it probably now needs to be renumbered to meet the probability, and where it affects the Colliery Dam and dam safety, from my perspective, is probability, and then the consequence from that probability. If there is likely to be less rainfall, like California now is in a severe drought, Las Vegas has Lake Mead, which is down 35 to 40 feet. So drought is happening, and if we get into that, we will in fact have less rainfall. But there is the possibility of a major event or a cluster that can pound us over time, and that would be the only one that would be a variance from some of those classifications that are now out where we're starting to get a trend of drought. So,
and are you suggesting, Councillor Kipp, that this information could all be sent to the Dam Safety Branch to perhaps have them reclassify the colliery dams down to an even lower classification than they presently have?
well, it took us a good year
Yes.
to get the seismic risk taken care of.
Yes, yes.
And now we've been into 4, 5, 6 months of this flood stuff.
Yes, yes.
These things take time.
Right.
To convince people in emergency management of the probability and the consequence of that probability, the likelihood of probability too.
Likelihood, yes,
That's
exactly.
an important one.
So-
but we have taken environment.
Eventually, perhaps the middle and lower Colliery dams could go down to a low and mid classification. That would perhaps be something that I could see the direction of them going. And again, as drought becomes more of an issue and flooding less, as our climate change actualizes into the future, then this would, of course, affect all our dams and all our water sources.
Thank you.
Leon Kate, 5936 Schoonaway. This is in relationship to the rink board $200,000 expenditure if it goes ahead. I'd like a commitment from City Council for our arenas and other facilities that are not handicap respectful. As you were at the game on Friday night, Mayor McKay, it's okay to come through the front door if you're handicapped because there's a button there that'll get you in and get you out. But after that, you have to smash the doors open with your wheelchair or if you're in a walker. I take a guy who's 88 years old, he's in a walker. There's no accessible access to push buttons that will open those doors into the arena. It's been that way for years. I don't know how it is in other facilities, but before I would say that we would touch the rink boards, I think we need a commitment from council to immediately address that. It's very disheartening to see people in power wheelchairs have to smash the doors open to go in and be behind the glass. We did acknowledge giving them space there. We did acknowledge giving them a ramp. Let's now give them acknowledgement by having the ability to push a button, not have to wait for a bunch of people to look at them and say, oh, do you need a hand? Let them have their own ability to take care of themselves and give respect to that. I'd like immediate attention to that at the Frank Crane Arena because there is no way to get into where the ice arena is itself, where the game's played, unless they get someone to push the door open or, like they always do, smash it open with their power chairs and go through. Thank you. I hope you would take attention to that.
Thank you.
Jeff Solomon, 6556 Street. Two quick questions. One is, who is going to be our contact at with city staff? We asked for that a couple of days and after the previous motion. Can we know who that is?
That would be Mr. Seward.
Okay, Mr. Seward is back. I know he was away. Is he back?
End of the week.
Okay, so Mr. Seward is our contact. Okay, and I'm just wondering, is there anyone from City Council, and I may be asking you, Mr. Mayor, if you would be speaking directly with the Dam Safety Branch? As you saw, there was a consistent pattern of communication with the Dam Safety section that was of primary concern for us, that these letters we considered as being somewhat threatening and intimidating throughout the last couple of years that arrived at opportune times. And I'm just wondering if you may wish to address that personally with them.
I wouldn't know.
May I ask why that is?
Because I don't accept it.
You don't feel that there's been any inappropriate action on their part?
I'm not prepared to say that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hi, Louise Guilfoy, 134 Howard Avenue. I just have a question about Golder and what we paid for. Like, I'm not an engineer by any means. I'm just wondering what when we hired them, why they didn't go out and measure what we have in question, the spillway, to get the actual physical numbers instead of using just kind of, other numbers that may or might be somebody else's numbers, not actually theirs.
So I can't answer that question because I'm not
just
an
wondering, did
either.
Golder go out and physically measure the spillway? And if not, why didn't they when we paid them to, study
So, Your
dams.
Worship, I've heard several members of the public and councillors say that they did not measure it physically and they weren't on site. I'll check tomorrow and ask them, and ask them why they didn't, if that's what they say they didn't.
This seems to be the biggest thing in dispute right now, is the numbers, so that would seem like pretty important. And I know this has been really a long time, and believe me, there's a lot of people who are really sick of talking about it and dealing with it and eating it and breathing it. So I understand, but this is a pretty big issue, and it was a huge election issue. So, it's really unfortunate that things are the way that they are right now, and it's going to take some time to resolve still, unfortunately. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn? Nope. Somebody's coming.
One more question.
Robert Fuller, 3350 Hammond Bay Road. I'm really puzzled as to why Mr. Yoakum's original motion last month seems to have taken so long to come to fruition, or by himself to even be taken seriously. When I see a motion from my councillors being made, I expect it to be followed, or if it isn't followed, to have a bloody goddamn good reason for it not to be followed. So my question is, if a motion is made by a council member and in some way, either through sheer arrogance or misunderstanding, not followed, what are the ramifications and where is the accountability here?
Well, maybe I can take you through the history of the motion. It was passed on the evening of February the 2nd. On February the 4th, our city manager asked council if they could please provide further information with respect to the motion. And there was some questions asked and needed to be answered with respect to the motion itself. You got no answer. I didn't write the motion, so I didn't feel it was necessary to answer that question. He asked the question again on February the 18th, and from what I understand, he received no answer as well. So how are you supposed to respond to that if you're not getting answers from your council who voted in favor of the motion? That's all I can say. And I see that there's at least one other person that wants to assist you with that.
What I'm particularly concerned is the collaboration that was supposed to have taken place. It's been a month. Why is nobody speaking with each other? You know, what the freaking hell is going on? We're spending money up the yin-yang. Pardon my language. Pardon my language.
Hey, so...
Pardon my language. I really apologize. Normally, I don't swear in public at all. But the money being spent on this, and to simply have this party and this party and this party simply talk to each other? Has all sense of reason gone out the window? I don't understand it.
Don't go away. You've got somebody else who wants to answer your question. Councillor Bestwick.
Not to answer a question, just to make a comment. I'm pretty sure I responded something to the effect of self-explanatory. I think that was my response. The motion was laid out and there was 5 points to it, and I think I responded with self-explanatory. If I needed to do more than that, my sincere apologies.
Yep. Sir. Name and address for the file, please.
Hi. My name's Terry Wagstaff. I live at 2701 Willow Grouse Crescent. I've just got a couple questions about the Colliery Dam, and I'm a numbers person, okay? And I heard that on the back, or on the letter from the Dam Society, it tells us that we're supposed to have 143 cubic meters per second flow. Now, my understanding of volumes and stuff is you have a flow coming in and you have a flow going out. Now your exit flow and your input flow has a relationship to your exit flow. So Who did the study to tell them how much water comes into the dam? Because based on the amount of water going into the dam will dictate how much water going out of it. Because if you only have 100 cubic meters per second going in, you're not going to get 143 going out. And from what I've heard so far is we don't really seem to have a good grasp even on the size of the overflow and the size of the dam. And I find it hard to believe that we have a good grasp of how much water comes behind the dam and at what rate. Because without knowing the rate of the flow coming into the dam, you can't establish what's going to go out. So does anybody have the answer if anybody ever did that study to figure out how much water comes in?
Councillor Kipp.
I asked earlier if we were doing any upstream valuation of our watershed. For example, the capacity, the embankment, the steepness. Typically, you're a ex-forestry man, and you know we studied all of that to build roads and that. And it hasn't been done. We haven't done a lot of watershed study. We haven't done a lot of upstream mitigation, any flow mitigation or anything. And basically, it's the assumption of the 23,000-year flood and the peak maximum flow based on assumption.
So how does the dam department and Department of Dams know what flow should be coming out of the dam if they don't know how much is going into it?
Well, if I can, they don't actually, they just value the plan that the engineers that we hired gave to them. They really don't, they just say whether they accept it or don't. They don't really do an engineering study on it or do an assessment or an evaluation of it themselves.
So how do our people have to come up with a number in order to get the outflow, don't they? Or do they just turn around and say, okay, I mean, I think we should have 143, or we take a dart, throw it to the board and come up with a number? Because to me, it's like having a 45-gallon drum. If you got 2 gallons going in and 1 gallon coming out, it's going to overflow. If you got 2 gallons going out to the bottom and only 1 gallon going on top, your volume is going to go down. Okay?
Thank you. You're asking lay people, you realize that?
Pardon?
You're asking lay people how they figured this out. You realize that?
Well, it's like a gas tank, okay? You can't be putting more money or more gas in your tank than there's volume. So the only time your gas tank overflows is when you put too much in. And that's dependent on how much you're putting in, not what's going out the other end. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.